Mr. Chairman.
Now may I proceed?
You may. You have 10 minutes, counsel.
Members of the jury, picture this. You're in Syracuse, New York at 4:30 in the morning on May 23rd, 2019. It's quiet, everything is still. And then suddenly, BAM! A bomb goes off. Now picture this. Off in the distance is the defendant, holding a cell phone. That cell phone just sent a text that detonated that bomb. Over the course of today, I myself and my co-counsel, Jessica Gorell, we're going to explain all the ways that the defendant helped set up the bombing, how she helped build the bomb, and how she eventually became the person who sent the text message that blew up the bank. Now, the defendant has been charged with conspiracy to use a weapon of mass destruction, conspiracy to destroy government property, the use of a weapon of mass destruction, and the destruction of government property. We have the burden of proving that the defendant did this beyond a reasonable doubt. We're going to do that by exploring 2 points. First, she helped build the bomb. She helped plant the bomb in the bank. She sent the text message. Number 2, we're going to show you that she completely understood everything she was doing when she set off that bomb. And we're going to prove these 2 points to you by exploring what happened with 2 witnesses. First, you're going to hear from Raphael O'Connor, the leader of a cult organization called the Covenant of Rightful Retribution. He's going to tell you about how Alex Franklin came to him and said she wanted to blow up the bank. How it was her idea to go to the bank in downtown Syracuse. How she picked that bank specifically. How she helped buy the equipment for making the bomb. How she maintained a bank account that was used to fund the bomb making. And how ultimately she was the architect of this plan. You're also going to hear from FBI agent Robert Lewin, who is going to tell you about their experience being embedded as an undercover agent in the Covenant. They're going to tell you about how, over the course of their investigation, they found a bomb fragment with the defendant's fingerprint on it. How they went and saw the bomb, or how they went and found records. Officer Lewin is going to tell you about how the investigation uncovered bomb fragments with the defendant's fingerprint on it. How they found text messages from the defendant's cell phone discussing how they were going to choose the specific bank. Officer Lewin is also going to tell you about how the whole concept that the defendant was brainwashed is completely unfounded. Yes, she suffered abuse. Yes, it was a very difficult lifestyle, but ultimately she knew exactly what she was doing. At the end of today's trial, you are going to get an instruction form listing out the elements of each charge that the defendant faces. We ask you to find the defendant guilty on all 4 counts. Thank you.
I want you to imagine someone who's alone, truly alone. They have nothing good in their life. Their family is either dead or abusive. Nobody loves them. They have no friends, no future. They have no possessions, nothing. I want you to imagine what that person would do for any human interaction whatsoever. Raphael O'Connor, mastermind of the attack on the New York Central Reserve Bank and a master manipulator, saw a vulnerable 13-year-old girl and used the most basic form of human kindness. And like a moth to a flame, Alex Franklin couldn't escape. You'll learn that in October of 2013, Alex Franklin was taken to the Covenant of Revolutionary Retribution cult compound by her father, Ray Franklin. You'll learn that she had no choice but to go to that compound with her father, and you'll learn that she specifically had to endure grueling acts of physical abuse and psychological manipulation. You'll learn specifically that Alex Franklin, on a daily basis, would have to endure certain rituals that were designed to purge her of the evils of capitalism. Things like starvation, manual labor. She'd have to be set in these 4x4 porta potties that were redesigned into small isolation chambers. And you'll learn that she had to be in these 4x4 spaces for days with no light, no food, no water. And eventually you'll learn that she went along with what the leadership of that compound wanted. Leadership like Raphael O'Connor, because what else could she do? Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my name is Thomas Wood, along with my co-counsel Vicki Rosling. We've been asked by Alex Franklin to come to you today and talk to you about the acts that were forced upon Alex Franklin and what she did to survive that ordeal. And you'll learn in this case from an expert that the defense has called named Dr. Leslie Pander. Dr. Pander is an expert in the field of psychology, and she's going to testify that at the time that Alex Franklin was a captive of that cult-like compound, she had a mental disorder called Stockholm Syndrome, also known as the captor's disorder. When someone who has been kidnapped and is both facing physical abuse and psychological manipulation, is isolated from the outside world, and has an inability to escape, falls in love with their captor because the captor will show small acts of kindness designed to manipulate their captive into doing whatever they want. And you'll learn from Dr. Pander that this type of disorder makes someone incapable of knowing the difference between right and wrong. Now, in this case, at the end of this trial, you're going to hear two things that are key. First of all, you're going to hear that the witnesses the prosecution has presented to rebut the claim that Alex Franklin has Stockholm Syndrome are woefully inadequate. Second thing you're going to hear from Dr. Pander and from Alex Franklin is that Alex Franklin meets all of the criteria that are necessary for someone who is held captive in a compound to have Stockholm Syndrome. I want to start with that first thing about the credibility and the requisite knowledge of the witnesses that the prosecution are going to put forward. You're going to hear from the leader of the Covenant of Revolutionary Retribution, Raphael O'Connor. And you're going to hear from the prosecution's own expert witness, Special Agent Lewin, that Raphael O'Connor is a master manipulator, a liar, a textbook sociopath, and someone who no reasonable person should trust. In addition, you're also going to hear from Special Agent Lewin, and Special Agent Lewin, you'll learn, is not just some disinterested, dispassionate expert in psychology. Special Agent Lewin was the person who was investigating this particular compound, had bungled the whole operation after being stuck in one of these isolation chambers, and that as a result of her failure to contact the FBI, the bomb ultimately went off and it was detonated. Now, on this issue of Stockholm Syndrome, Dr. Pander is going to testify today that there are 4 factors or criteria that have to be met for someone to have Stockholm Syndrome. And you're going to hear that every single one was met. So I want to take them one at a time. First, you'll learn that one of the factors is the threat of physical or psychological abuse by an abuser. Second, that someone was shown small acts of kindness. Third, that they were isolated from the perspectives of others. And fourth, that they had an inability to escape. On the issue of threats, you'll learn that Alex Franklin was physically abused. No question. You'll even see the medical records. Medical records showing how on a nearly monthly basis, she would come to the hospital showing she had sprained wrists, cuts in her arms and her face. You'll learn that she had cracked ribs. You'll learn that even the doctors thought she was a victim of domestic abuse. That's how serious it was. You'll also learn, most importantly to this factor, that it was Raphael O'Connor who directed all of this to happen. You'll hear about a specific incident in June of 2015 where Alex Franklin's father, Ray Franklin, punched Alex to the ground, and then Raphael O'Connor ordered Ray Franklin to pick her back up and punch her to the ground again, at the direction and orders of Raphael O'Connor. That second factor we're going to show, acts of kindness. You'll learn that in between the physical abuse and the psychological manipulation, Raphael O'Connor would show small acts of kindness. You'll even hear from Raphael O'Connor that he gave her a secret cell phone where she could communicate only to Raphael. You'll learn that he would drop her off to school and he'll drive her back and forth. You'll learn that, most importantly, Raphael saved Alex Franklin from almost being beaten to death by her father, Ray Franklin. That third factor that you're going to hear about, isolation. Well, most importantly, you're going to hear about the chambers that she was forcibly locked in. But in addition to that, there's also a social and a mental isolation that Alex Franklin had while as part of the compound. You'll learn that this particular compound Alex was at was in the middle of nowhere, separated entirely from the outside world. You'll learn that Alex, outside of that compound, had no friends, no social circle. She even lived with Raphael O'Connor, the leader of this compound, ensuring that she was isolated from anyone outside. And finally, an inability to escape. You'll learn that as part of her indoctrination in that cult, she had to learn that capitalism was evil, working hard for money was evil, that ultimately, even if she did escape, that she didn't have the life skills that it would take in order to get outside and thrive after escaping from that compound. When you put all these factors together, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you'll see Alex Franklin had Stockholm Syndrome, a condition that made her incapable of knowing the difference between right and wrong. And at the end of this trial, my co-counsel, Vicky Roslin, is going to come back to you, discuss all this evidence and testimony, and ask that you find Alex Franklin not guilty by reason of insanity. Thank you.
Witness.
Yes, Your Honor, we call Raphael O'Connor. Good morning, Mr. O'Connor.
Morning.
Please introduce yourself briefly to the jury.
My name is Raphael O'Connor.
And Mr. O'Connor, how were you involved with the bombings at the New York Central Reserve Bank?
I was one of the co-conspirators who helped ultimately bomb and blow up the New York Central Reserve Bank in Syracuse.
Could you explain more about your co-conspirators?
Sure. My co-conspirators were my friend Baylor Riswald and the defendant.
Are you able to identify?
Who else was involved in that with you? What kind of question is, are you able to explain more about your co-conspirators?
Right.
Correct. Ask what's in your head.
Who were the other co-conspirators?
My friend Baylor Riswald and the defendant.
Who is the defendant?
That's actually her right there. Alex Franklin has the denim jacket.
How do you know the defendant, other than as a co-conspirator?
She was a member of my organization called the Covenant of Revolutionary Retribution.
I'll come back to the defendant in a moment, but you also mentioned another co-conspirator. What was their name?
Baylor Riswald.
Where is Baylor Riswald?
Baylor Riswald committed suicide recently.
Objection, Your Honor, to the use of the term co-conspirator. None of these people have been convicted of that crime and should not be used here. It's prejudicial to the jury.
I'm going to sustain the objection. You could, I'm just concerned that the witnesses using a term which is a very technical legal term in lay manner. So I would ask you to use, partner, people working with me, whatever it might be, but let's stay away from the legal language.
Yes, Your Honor. Who were you? What was the name of the other person who helped you plan the attack?
Bayla Riswald.
Where are they now?
Bayla Riswald committed suicide after she was caught by the police.
Did you ever get a chance to talk with Bayla Riswald before they committed suicide?
No. But I did get the chance to read her suicide note.
I'm approaching with what has been pre-marked as Exhibit 10A, B, and C. Mr. O'Connor, what have I handed you?
This is the suicide note that was written by Bayla Riswald immediately before she died.
Your Honor, we move to admit Exhibit 10A into evidence. It has been stipulated as authentic.
Okay, yeah, all right, any objections?
Yes, Your Honor, we object on the basis of hearsay.
Your Honor, under Rule of Evidence 804B2, this would qualify as a dying declaration. If I may make an offer of proof, this document was written in the moments leading up to Bayla Riswald's suicide.
How do we know that?
It was found, it has been stipulated as a document that was written in the moments leading up to Bayla Riswald's suicide, and Bayla Riswald committed suicide the same day that this was completed.
That was all stipulated? It was not just stipulated, it was authentic? More than that?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
Certain ones like this one are more specific about what they.
yeah.
All right, so, and tell me exactly what the stipulation was again?
The stipulation is that this is authentic and was also written prior to Bayla Riswald's suicide, and Bayla Riswald committed suicide upon completing this document.
All right, I'm going to overrule the objection.
May I publish copies to the jury?
You may show it to the jury.
Mr. O'Connor, I'd like to turn to Exhibit 10C. This looks like a diagram, correct?
Yeah, this is actually a sort of a model of what the Iris bomb, which was the bomb we used to blow up the Central Reserve Bank.
Why would Bayla Riswald be drawing a diagram of this bomb?
Well, it was an instruction to help construct the bomb. Specifically, I personally, along with Alex Franklin, helped to build the bomb that was used to blow up the Central Reserve Bank.
Why was Bayla Riswald providing information about this bomb?
Objection. Assumes facts not in evidence. There's nothing that says that Bayla Riswald was the one who drew this.
All right, I'll sustain that.
Was Bayla Riswald aware, to your knowledge, of the Irish bomb?
this?
Who drew this?
Bayla Riswald.
Why did Bayla Riswald draw the Irish bomb?
Objection.
Sustain. Asking to speculate someone else's state of mind. What are you after there, Jim? What are you trying to prove right here with this?
Just trying to explain about.
Your argument here is that this bomb got blown, that the place got blown up with this bomb, right? We don't entirely care about Baylor at all, honestly. We care about the defendant mostly, and what her involvement was here. This is just getting us to the bottom, so, we don't need to spend a lot of time on this.
Okay. Can I ask one more question and then put it down?
Sorry, what?
Can I ask one more question about it and then put it down?
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. O'Connor, there's a small cell phone on this diagram.
Yes,
Do you
there is.
understand what that's for?
Well, the Iris bomb used what's called a remote cell phone detonator, which means it was hooked up to a cell phone, and then if someone either texted or called that cell phone, it would activate the bomb and it would explode.
Do you know the text or the number for the bomb?
Yes, I do.
Okay, we'll revisit that later, but I want to go back, I want to explore more about Alex's involvement with this planning. Overall, what would you say was her role?
Alex was the defendant was the person who came up with the idea of bombing the New York Central Reserve Bank. She assembled the bomb, helped plant the bomb in the bank, and then was the person who detonated the bomb.
So I want to address those 4 different things that you mentioned in turn. You said it was her idea?
Yes.
When did she come up with the idea?
We were watching a parade on TV, and the parade actually showed the Central Reserve Bank in Syracuse in the background. And that was when I received a text from Alex Franklin saying, "Let's blow up the bank."
I did, hearsay.
You said she told you that she wanted to blow up the bank?
Statement, there was a statement from, he received a text saying, a hearsay statement, let's blow up the bank.
Okay.
Do you have a response?
What's your response?
It was a statement of party opponent.
Who's making the statement?
This,
The defendant. Party opponent.
Your Honor, if I may be heard outside the presence of the jury, Mr. O'Connor is explaining that the defendant made a statement to him, therefore the statement would qualify as a statement of party opponent.
All right. That's overruled then.
Mr. O'Connor, what have I handed you?
This is a text message that Alex Franklin sent me
What's the date of it?
January 4th, 2019.
And, Your Honor, I would like to move to have, or is this in the same or substantially similar condition as when you received the text message on January 4th, 2019?
Yes.
Your Honor, I move to admit Exhibit 4F into evidence.
All right, I don't hear any objections?
No, Your Honor.
May I publish to the jury?
Mm-hmm.
In this text message, there is a text from the defendant that says the Central Reserve Bank.
Yes.
What was she responding to?
Well, I had asked her which one, and that's when she replied Central Reserve Bank. So she was suggesting that if we were going to bomb any place, it would be this particular bank in Syracuse.
Thank you. You can put that aside for now. You also mentioned earlier that she helped in assembling the bombs.
Yes.
What specifically did she do?
Well, you see, neither Alex nor I knew how to make a bomb. It's kind of hard to do, so that's when we reached out together to my partner, Baylor Riswald, who is an old flame. Riswald had a lot of experience in making bombs.
And did you see the bombs after they had been completed?
Well, I had helped assemble the bomb along with Alex Franklin, so yes,
So would you recognize photos of the bomb if you saw them again?
I would.
What have I handed you?
This is a picture of one of the bombs that was planned to be used, but ultimately was not.
Is this bomb the same as the bombs we saw in the diagram?
Yes, it looks exactly like a diagram because we assembled it to look like that.
So this is the Iris bomb?
Yes, this is a second one that I had directed Alex to hide after the feds started coming after us.
Now, an Iris bomb, what is another way to describe an Iris bomb?
A pipe bomb.
Thank you. Your Honor, I'd like to admit Exhibit 3 into evidence.
No objections, Your
All
Honor.
right, three's in.
Mr. O'Connor, I'd like to go on to talk about how the bomb was actually placed in the New York Central Reserve Bank in Syracuse, New York.
Objection. Assumes facts not in evidence.
Has there been testimony that the bomb was planted there? No? Okay.
No.
Sustained.
We haven't actually talked about how you went into the
Okay,
bank yet.
got it.
Mr. O'Connor, I'd like to talk about more of your planning for bombing the bank.
Sure.
What other steps besides building the bomb did you take to plan the attack?
Well, we had to find a place to specifically plant the bomb. Alex Franklin had told me that she didn't want anyone to be injured by the explosion, so she wanted it done in the middle of the night when no one was there. The problem with that, of course, is that we couldn't just break in the middle of the night. It'd be much easier if we could hide it someplace where security wouldn't find it, and then when everyone left in the middle of the night, then the bomb would go off.
What did you do to regularly go into the bank?
Well, we had Alex Franklin open up a bank account.
in conjunction with Exhibit 7A through B and C. Mr. O'Connor, what have I handed you?
This is the bank account that we opened for Alex Franklin.
In this, you opened this for the purposes of helping with the attack?
That's correct, so that we could lawfully go in and out of the bank and have a reason.
Your Honor, I move to admit Exhibit 7A into evidence. It has been previously stipulated as authentic and admissible
Alright.
without objection.
Okay,
May I publish a copy to the jury?
you may. Was it stipulated as admissible without objection, this one?
I think so, yeah. It's either one
I
of
know
the
there was
specific
one
is.
that you said was, I would be surprised if it was this one.
I
Yeah.
think there are a few that are admissible without
Alright.
objection.
I don't think this one was though.
Just double check with
We'll
what,
double check.
I'll double
the
check,
extent
yeah.
of the stipulation. All you need is it's authentic, because that's all you really need.
Yeah, I have it in my notes, it's admissible without objection, but I'll double
Alright.
check.
Double check.
So, Mr. O'Connor, you established this bank account to help you go into the bank over and over again?
Well, to be clear, it was Alex Franklin's bank account, but yes.
Okay. Then,
So Alex opened the account.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's stop doing the we.
so after Alex opened the account, and went in and out of the bank, how did you actually plant the bomb in the bank?
We did a couple of practice runs at first, so we'd leave little cups of coffee, during business hours, and then the next day we check and see if security, threw the cups away to see if they actually, looked under the tables and things like that. Eventually, we did find the perfect spot, and that was the night before the attack.
Who brought the bomb into the bank?
Alex Franklin.
How?
Alex Franklin snuck it through a handbag, and then we sort of did an exchange, and then we placed it under a table that we knew security wouldn't look at.
And then that night, what did you two do?
Alex Franklin detonated the bomb, causing the explosion on the New York Central Reserve Bank, and I watched.
Now, you said that the bomb detonated.
Yes.
How did you detonate it again?
So like we said before, there was a remote text, phone attached to the Iris bomb. So Alex sent the text message to the bomb, which then caused it to explode.
And earlier today, you said you remembered the phone number for the bomb?
That's right.
Approaching with Exhibit 4K. Mr. O'Connor, what have I handed you?
This is a screenshot of the specific message that was sent to the cell phone that was attached to the Iris bomb, the one that caused it to explode.
And there's a phone number that this is sent to. Do you recognize that phone number?
Yes, 315-8112-1998. That is the cell phone number of the bomb, the phone attached to the bomb.
Your Honor, I move to admit Exhibit 4K into evidence.
All right,
Your Honor, I object on the grounds of hearsay. It, unlike the statement made by the witness, it's still disputed as to who actually sent the text from the phone. So there's no.
and it's disputed, huh?
Yes.
What's your position?
It is our position that Mr. O'Connor texted the bomb using
So the
this.
first thing you do when you stand up is you say, objection, Your Honor, that's not party opponent. O'Connor's the one who wrote that. That's how you do it. It's simple, simple, simple.
All right.
Not lawyer talking, talk around everything. So, so counsel, it's indicated that this witness may not be accurate about who wrote this.
Your Honor, if I may make an offer of proof outside the presence of the jury, we do not offer this statement for the truth of the matter asserted. We offer this to show that a text was sent and it caused the bomb to be detonated. We have not offered that this was actually a statement of party opponent,
So you're not gonna argue that this was sent by the defendant?
not to oppose the hearsay objection. We are offering this to show that a text message was sent. We argue that it was sent by the defendant, and over the course of trial, we hope to show why. However, for the admission of this particular piece of evidence, we are not offering it for the truth of the matter, merely to show that a text was sent from this phone and it detonated the bomb.
All right, good argument. Your objection's overruled.
Your Honor, has this been admitted into evidence?
That's admitted, yes.
Thank you,
Your objection's overruled, it's admitted, it's evidence.
May I publish to the jury?
You may.
Did we ever establish what phone it came from?
Yeah, he said earlier that it's the defendant's phone.
Oh, okay.
Mr. O'Connor, the text says boom, correct?
And by the way, just to interrupt for a second, since we're already interrupting, there's Ralphie and there's Ralph in these texts, and I don't get it, and so somebody, and this is my second trial, so I ought to have gotten it by now. I
Yeah,
gotta explain that stuff to me.
I think we had a question about that.
I think we're waiting on,
Oh, we don't know for
date,
sure what's
because
going on.
there might be an error.
All right, okay.
Okay. Mr. O'Connor, the text message in this says boom smiley face.
Yes.
Do you know why it might say that?
Well, the way the smiley, well, that's number one, the text that caused the explosion, but then as for the smiley face, Alex would always use smiley faces in that way, with an equal sign and a parentheses.
All right, Mr. O'Connor. You've already explained a lot about Alex's involvement in the case, or in the attack. Why would she want to bomb the attack? Or
Objection.
do you know why, or did she ever tell you why she wanted to bomb that bank?
Yes, Alex Franklin specifically told me that her mom had been killed in that specific bank, and she wanted revenge. She also said that the bank was corrupt. That was the other reason she said.
Okay. I want to turn now to the defense's argument that Alex was,
Objection. Argumentative. There's been no defense argument yet.
It's apparently a rule that they're allowed to discuss the defense argument, or the defense claim of insanity, whether it's an argument or not, and they did open on it. You can, I'll overrule the objection.
Mr. O'Connor, I want to discuss
Although claim is a better word.
claim. Okay.
Claim, when a person makes a claim, it's specious.
Okay.
If they have an argument, it might be right.
Mr. O'Connor, I want to discuss the claim that Alex didn't really understand what she was doing when she sent the attack, or when she sent the text message, and that she was suffering from Stockholm Syndrome. Did you ever threaten Alex?
No,
Did you ever hit Alex?
absolutely not.
Would you ever want to hurt Alex
No.
physically?
In fact, I saved her from almost being beaten to death by her father.
Care about Alex?
I did.
You wanted to take care of Alex?
Objection leading. This whole series is leading.
Okay, sorry. Okay, scrap it. Did you ever tell anyone that they couldn't leave the compound?
No. In fact, staying at the compound was completely voluntary.
Were there ways that people could leave the compound?
Yes, we had sort of a bunch of community cars that people could drive outside to, get things from the town nearby.
Was there any, were the cars off limits to anybody?
No, they were available to everyone.
You also mentioned that Alex went to college.
Yes, in fact, I paid for her for schooling. No, she didn't.
How did you get her to college?
I would drive her to and from.
Did you stay at college with her?
No, I'd leave her on her own.
Mr. Connor, I want to ask a couple last questions before letting you go. Have you taken any responsibility for your involvement with this case?
Yes, I have.
How so?
Well, I pled guilty to several of the charges under a plea deal on condition that I testify against any of my partners truthfully.
Is that what you're doing here today?
Yes, that's right.
And remind us, what were your charges?
Well, my original charges were conspiracy to use a weapon of mass destruction, use of a weapon of mass destruction, destruction of government property, and conspiracy to destroy government property.
And how did you plead to all these?
Well, on condition that I plead guilty to the use of the destruction of government property and the use of a weapon of mass destruction, the charges for conspiracy were dropped.
And everything you said today must be truthful?
That's correct. If I lie, I don't get the charges dropped. I go right back to spending the rest of my life in jail.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right.
Oh, God.
Okay, thanks.
Fine. It's part of my plate.
Hello, Mr. O'Connor.
Hello?
Well, you stated that Miss Franklin helped you create this bomb, isn't that right?
She didn't help me, I helped her.
She helped you in composing this bomb, though.
I'm sorry, that's wrong. She didn't help me, I helped her.
Your Honor, at this point, I'd like to approach the defendant with his affidavit.
Sure.
Is this, what is this document?
You're on a cross.
Huh?
You're on a cross.
Yes.
That means you tell the answers, you don't
Oh,
ask
okay,
questions.
right, yes.
What is that document? No. You tell him, what is that document? You tell him.
This document is your affidavit, isn't that right?
Good.
No, it's not.
This affidavit is your sworn testimony?
This is my testimony to the grand jury. It's not an affidavit.
Right.
Excuse me, where exactly is my sister going in the testimony?
Counsel, that's not a proper objection. Sit down. You may continue your questioning now that we know that what we have here is prior sworn testimony. Go ahead.
Mr. O'Connor, I direct your attention to page 21, line 16.
21. Okay.
Can you read that line silently as I read it out loud? Sorry, wrong page. April, Alex, and Baylor were in charge of getting materials. Baylor and I would build the bombs. Is that correct? Reading from the testimony?
No, that's not correct. You failed to read the entire thing. It says, when did you start building the bomb? April. Alex and Baylor were in charge of getting the materials. Baylor and I would build the bombs. Alex wanted to help plant it and specifically asked to be the one to detonate it.
Do I retrieve the affidavit, or do I just,
You can go get it or you can leave it, doesn't matter.
now, Mr. O'Connor, I want to talk to you about the different ways that, about the life that Ms. Franklin had when she lived on the compound. You encouraged punishments on the compound, isn't that right?
I'm sorry?
You encouraged punishments on the compound, isn't that right?
I don't encourage punishment, no. It is a new way of living.
Okay. Is part of that new way of living isolation chambers?
That is not a requirement within our covenant. However, if somebody feels like they are becoming too much attached to the material world and the old way of doing things under a capitalist system, they are given access to what we call isolation chambers, so that way they can devolve themselves from those material attachments.
So to rephrase my question, to ask it again, isolation chambers are part of the practices that you have on the compound.
It is a voluntary practice that somebody can engage in, yes.
Thank you. And they also engage in starvation, isn't that correct?
I wouldn't call it starvation.
But isn't that true?
Well, fasting is something that they can do, yes.
All religions
Not mine.
I know that not to be true.
These punishments were for breaking the rules of the covenant, isn't that right?
I'm sorry, again, you said punishment and we do not enforce punishments.
Let me rephrase.
I wish that you would.
These repercussions.
Repercussion is just another word for punishment.
These rituals were done when individuals broke the rules of the covenant, isn't that right?
Again, our program is entirely voluntary. It is not a requirement that they do any of these things. So to suggest that there are rules or that these are consequences to breaking rules would not be correct.
Okay, let's talk about something else then. Mr. O'Connor, you have lots of members on the compound, isn't that right?
We have many members, people who have chosen to give up a corrupt system of government.
And Mr. Franklin was one of those members?
I'm sorry.
Mr. Ray Franklin
That's
was
correct.
one of
Yes,
those
he
members?
was.
Okay. And you witnessed Miss Franklin be hit by Mr. Franklin, didn't you?
He was very abusive there, yes.
In fact, on one of those times, you saved her.
He almost killed her that night, yes.
That's very kind of you. I'm going to talk about the
Thank
different things that you did that were very kind towards Miss Franklin. You gave her a cell phone.
I did.
Against the rules of the covenant?
Again, we don't really have rules like that. And so I did give her a cell phone. But she was going off to college and things like that. I mean, that would make things very efficient for her to tell me that she was ready to come home so I can go pick her up.
And you paid for her to go to this university?
Yes, we actually did that for many of the young people on the compound. If any of our children within the covenant wanted to go to college, we made it a point that the covenant would pay for them. So it was not an exclusive option for the defendant. It was actually something that we did for all children.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now I want to talk about how Miss Franklin was, how she lived on the compound away from everyone. It's not the way I want that. So back to the cell phone. She was to use it to communicate with you, correct?
Well, I also had a cell phone, so yes, she could communicate with me.
And you told her at one point that she couldn't spend time with her friends.
That wasn't your point, was it? Isn't your point only you? Can you make the point only you? To use to communicate with you is not a point, who cares?
Right.
Hey, she used her phone, she called you on the phone? Yep, she called me on the phone.
Okay. And she was only allowed to communicate with you, isn't that correct?
That's not correct.
And you told her at one point that she
Objection. You told her, calls for hearsay.
Oh, sorry. Your Honor, this is, if I may be heard out the,
Please.
Your Honor, please, if I may be heard outside
You're
of.
outside, I'm sorry, I didn't mean for you to
Sorry.
say please. I just
Okay.
meant please, you're outside the presence of the jury.
Okay.
Start talking.
These statements are not being used for us.
What statement is that?
The statement,
They can offer proof.
The right to proof. Objection hearsay. Offer of proof. Here's why it's relevant.
okay.
Here's why it's not hearsay. Done.
Okay, Your Honor, this statement that Ms. Franklin was not allowed to spend time with her friends while she was at university is being proffered to show that she was isolated. It's not being used.
Who's making the statement? I didn't know.
Mr. O'Connor.
All right, so he said before, what?
And it's not being proffered for a statement as a matter of fact. I'm using it as a command. So it's not. It is
What
not
are the
hearsay.
words he used?
May I refer to the text messages? It was stated in the text messages.
Which exhibit?
Well, if you're
It's-
trying to put a hearsay statement in, you really ought to know what the statement is.
Right,
That's what I'm asking.
it's 4A. And 4E. Exhibit 4B, which has not been offered into evidence yet. Mr. O'Connor stated that I stopped by to surprise you with lunch, and instead of studying at the library, I find you at the cafe having drinks with some skanky material-obsessed bimbos. Ms. Franklin stated, "Calm down, Ralphie. I literally just wanted to get coffee with them." And then Mr. O'Connor stated, no, I'm upset with you. That's not why you're there. If that's the life you want, then leave the covenant. I gave you everything you have, and I can take it back. Is that what you want?
Okay, I thought you were giving me a statement that said that she could only use the phone to call him. That's not.
Yes, Your Honor, I'm sorry to confuse. When, after we established that she was only using communication between the two, I made the statement, you told her that she couldn't spend time with her friends outside of, the purposes of, I don't know how exactly I worded it, but the concept was is that she spent, you told her that she could not spend time with her friends.
You told her she could not spend time with her friends, and that is not hearsay.
That is not hearsay,
That's a command.
because it's a command.
That's probably right. Very sophisticated. I'm not sure judges are gonna get it. So,
Or,
but it certainly has an effect on her, on the defendant's mind, state of mind, so you can get it in that way as an alternative. All right, so I'll allow the question, you may have it.
okay. So you told Ms. Franklin at one point that she couldn't spend time with her friends.
I one time saw her with some people, she did not characterize them as friends, that I thought were antithetical to our cause, and so I raised a concern about it.
And you told her it's because the covenant comes first.
It does.
Alright, now, were you ever upset at Ms. Franklin for not being present when you asked for her?
I don't know what you mean by that.
Were you ever upset with Ms. Franklin when she wasn't where you asked her to be? Or where, when she, sorry,
I don't know what you're talking about.
okay, Mr. O'Connor.
So what facts do you have?
What
She
facts?
said, here, first off, you got a document that says all of this, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're working off of, so it might be easy if you got that in.
Mhm.
Then once you get that in, you say, now, I want to talk about this first one right here. She was hanging out with her friends and you got all mad at her, right? Or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the second one. You know, whatever it is, but you got them in evidence and you can get them in, you can deal with it more easily. So put them in evidence. Put them in first.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness with exhibits 4A and 4B?
You may.
What are these documents?
They look like text conversations.
Your Honor, at this point, I'd like to move that these exhibits be moved into evidence and they are stipulated as to be authentic.
Okay, any objection?
Lack of foundation, Your Honor.
Question, there's a lack of foundation, she hasn't shown who the text messages are between, whose phone they are from, there's no, authentication that these are what they purport to be.
Well,
Or a fair
they
and
are what
accurate-
they purport to be is.
Or that they are-
It's that they're, because they're stipulated to be what they be.
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
So how do you answer the question that we don't even know who's speaking here?
Your Honor, may I lay the proper foundation?
Sure, go ahead.
Mr. O'Connor, who are these text messages between? Oh, sorry. These text messages are between you and Ms. Franklin, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And the part that's in the bubble, that's you talking, or the other way around. The part that's in the bubble, that's her talking. The part that's outside here, that's you talking, right? Okay. She says she wants to go to this lecture. You say no, right? How come? There's work to be done at the compound. She said please, right? You said no, right? All right, let's go. Let's look at the next one. Stop by to surprise you. You found her someplace with some friends and you yelled at her, didn't you? Right there. Whatever he says.
Mhm.
What's that?
Yeah, I get it. Yes,
Okay,
yes.
So they're all in,
Okay.
and you may work with them now. Go ahead. So where I'm admitting exhibits 4A, B, C, D, and that's it. A, B, C, and D.
Yes.
Those are the ones for this.
Your Honor, may I publish the jury?
Yes. Okay, now that we have them.
Would you like to see this? Or,
It's one of the four.
yeah. All right, Mr. O'Connor, I'd like to direct your attention to the, Your Honor, I'd like to admit these text messages
I believe they've been admitted.
separately, not
Well,
collectively.
Yes, and we're keeping their original numbers.
Oh, right,
for
right,
A,
because
B,
of
C,
that.
and D.
Okay. Mr. O'Connor, I'd like to direct your attention to Exhibit 4A.
okay,
No, it stated there that Ms. Franklin said, "There is a lecture tonight on socialism's rise in American politics. It connects with what we're learning in class, and I want to go. Can I?" Is that what she said?
that's what it says here.
And you stated, "No, there's work to be done at the compound."
Yes.
And she said, "Babe, please." And what did you respond? Or-
No, the covenant comes first.
Okay. Now, Mr. O'Connor, I'd like to direct your attention to Exhibit 4B.
Okay.
Do that last.
Oh, do that.
Do C and D next.
C and D next? Okay. Mr. O'Connor, I'd like to move your attention to Exhibit 4C.
Okay.
Ms. Franklin stated, "I need to study after class with my group. Can I stay on campus until 6 or 7? What did you say?
I said no.
How about rather than being so formal, I say, all right, now, turn to 4C, right?
Mhm.
There, she asked you if she could hang out with her friends again, right? And you answered, no.
Okay, yeah. So I'd like to direct your attention to 4C. There, Ms. Franklin asked if she could stay on campus to study, and you said no. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Once again.
And and now I'd like to direct your attention to 4D. Once again, you told Ms. Franklin that you're going to pick her, that you will.
First thing is she says she wants to stay work late with Stacy, right? Once again, you say no.
So Ms. Franklin then states that she wants to work on a project with Stacy, and then you say no. Isn't that right?
That's great.
Now, Mr. O'Connor, I'd like to.
Don't make me wait. So say that out loud.
Okay.
He's really an asshole.
Okay.
Right?
And you said, "No, I'll pick you up at 5. Don't make me wait."
Mm-hmm.
Now,
You didn't say it that bad. Don't make me wait. That's how you say it bad.
Okay.
Come on,
don't make me wait.
good. I like that. Next.
Finally, I want to direct your attention to Exhibit 4B.
Okay.
You stated that you stopped by to surprise her with lunch, and instead of studying, you find her having drinks with some skanky, material, obsessed bimbos. Isn't that right?
Yes, they're antithetical to the cause of the covenant.
Now, Miss Franklin said, "Calm down, Ralphie. I literally just wanted to get coffee with them." And isn't that what she said?
That is what you wrote.
Okay. And then you said no. No, I'm so upset with you. That's not why you're there. Isn't that right?
It is
You're
accurate.
reading this too heavily.
Is it too heavily? Okay.
Yeah, you're taking way too much time with this, right?
Okay.
You just wanted to go on this last one, you go something like, so let's take a look at this last one here, 4B, right? On 4B, you saw her, you went by the campus and you found that she was having drinks with some of her girlfriends, right? And you called them skanky, material-obsessed bimbos and yelled at her, didn't you?
Yeah.
And in the end, you threatened her. You said, if that's the life you want, then this is the only part you want to read, I think. If that's the life you want, then leave the covenant. I gave you everything you had, and I can take it back. Isn't that what you said to her? Like that.
Yeah, that's okay.
But that's the only piece you really need to read
Right.
literally. That's the killer.
Do you want me? Oh,
You can do it if you want.
okay. Mr. O'Connor, in these sets of text messages, Ms. Franklin said you found Ms. Franklin having drinks with some skanky, material-obsessed bimbos. And she said, "Ralphie, I literally just wanted to get coffee with them. Isn't that right?"
Okay.
And then you responded, "No. If that's the life you want, then leave the covenant. I gave you everything you have, and I can take it back. Isn't that what you said?
It's true. But I mean, like I said, she always had the opportunity to leave whenever she wanted.
Actually, let's talk about that.
Yeah. She had the opportunity to leave whenever she wanted. I mean, it was an entirely voluntary process
Mr. O'Connor.
to be part of the covenant. I thought you wanted to talk about it.
Well, I'll talk about it. Finally, so you say anyone can leave the compound whenever they like.
That's absolutely true. The covenant is entirely voluntary.
And
Nobody is required to stay, and nobody is expected to stay.
And that when they join the compound, they have to give up all of their possessions.
They don't join a compound. They join the covenant.
Okay, I'll rephrase.
I wish you would.
So so when individuals join the covenant, they have to give up their possessions, isn't that right?
The whole point of the covenant is a counterculture to this materialistic capitalist system that we have. And so you can't buy into that and maintain your worldly possessions at the same time.
Oh, I see, okay. So they gave up things like their cell phones?
Yes, the cell phones, houses, cars, all material possessions except for clothing because we're not a nudist colony.
So if they were
Except
to,
in the isolation chambers, I heard.
so if they were to leave the compound, they would have had the clothes in their bags, isn't that right?
I'm sorry?
My bad. So if they were to leave the compound, they would have had the clothes on their back, isn't that right?
Objection, speculation.
Your Honor, he can,
There's no way around.
there's no way around that? Okay.
That's speculating what they would have if they left.
Ms. Franklin was a child when she joined the compound, isn't that correct?
She was a teenager.
She was 13 years old?
That's a teenager.
Because she was a teenager,
Mhm.
she was educated on the compound.
Well, she was educated before she came to the compound too.
But yeah, so she was also educated on the compound. She didn't learn any practical skills beyond the government being a corrupt entity, did she?
Objection, Your Honor, there's no way to qualify what she did or did not learn as to
Practical skills?
practical skills.
I'm gonna overrule that objection because the witness could make that response. Question, it's a fair question. That's right. He should say yes.
I'm sorry, you'll have to repeat.
Okay. Ms. Franklin did not learn any practical skills beyond the government being a corrupt entity, did she?
No, that's not correct.
So the final thing I want to talk about is the deal the prosecution gave you today. You convinced a lot of people to join your group, didn't you?
I don't know what that has to do with my deal.
I'll get to it.
Okay, I just don't know how to answer that question.
You've convinced a lot of people to join your covenant?
A lot of people are like-minded with me, and so I didn't need to convince them. They chose to join me.
And you were one of the members who was involved in the May 23rd, 2019 attack on the Central Reserve Bank. Isn't that
Yes, I was.
right? You helped plan the attack.
That's correct.
You helped make the bomb.
That's correct.
You planted the bomb.
Yes.
And then you detonated it.
No. The defendant
After the
detonated bomb.
Central Reserve Bank blew up, the FBI raided your compound, isn't that right?
I wasn't there.
Then you were arrested?
I was arrested, yes.
Okay.
But I wasn't there during the raid.
And you were facing a lot of charges.
I'm sorry?
You were facing a lot of charges when you were arrested?
I pled guilty to a lot of charges.
Conspiracy to use a weapon of mass destruction?
Yes.
Use of a weapon of mass destruction?
Yes.
Conspiracy to destroy government property?
Yes.
And destruction of property.
That's correct.
The same charges that Ms. Franklin is facing now.
And she's guilty of.
And you're 47 years old, right?
That's correct.
If you fought those charges and were convicted, you would have gone to jail for the rest of your life, isn't that correct?
I have no way of knowing.
But the prosecution saved your life and offered you a sweet deal, didn't they?
They didn't save my life. I'm going to jail.
But not for the rest of your life?
Well, who knows? I mean, I'm going to jail. I know that.
But the prosecution dropped your conspiracy charges, isn't that right?
They dropped one of my charges, but I'm still going to jail for the use of a weapon of mass destruction. So I don't know.
Nothing further.
Oh, do you want to read it?
That'd be nice.
Like a redirect?
Well, if only if it's really a good one.
I was gonna say, Mr. O'Connor, you tried to explain how people could voluntarily participate in rituals and leave. You want to explain more on that?
You already explained
spent
that.
half his time saying
Let's
how
go
it's
straight forward.
Alright.
If she made any points, because of course Tom did your job for you in a sense, because the witness answers all the questions with all the responses, there's nothing to do on redirect. Otherwise, you have to give the responses. But so you think, well, what did she score? Did she score anything? You know, so whatever that was, that's the couple of things you get up in response.
Okay. Then,
Alright.
no redirect.
You don't have it.
Trying to make
Let's have another witness then.
Your Honor, the
Trial's
state,
dragging on forever here.
the state calls Special Detective Reagan Lewin. Good morning. Could you please state your name and your job or your occupation for the record, please?
Yes. My name is Reagan Lewin, and I am a behavioral psychoanalyst with the FBI. It's part of their special investigation division, which is short name for SID.
And why are you here today?
I'm here because I was the lead investigator in the bombing of the Central Reserve Bank.
So how exactly does one become a special investigator?
So as joining the part of the FBI, I had to go through 3 months of basic
That's
training.
a different answer. You asked, how does one become? Answering, how did she become?
How did
You
you
asked,
become
how
a
did she
special
become?
investigator?
What was the question?
How did you become a special investigator for the FBI?
I became a special investigator when you join the FBI, you go through 3 months of basic. And then I went through a special program where we did 2 months of special investigations. And then afterwards, I did 3 months in a program where we went into psychoanalytics.
And how many investigations have you done throughout your time in the FBI?
I've done 17.
And how many of those investigations involve conspiracy to use a weapon of mass destruction?
12.
And how many of those resulted in convictions?
12.
Now, what, if any, materials have you reviewed today in order to be prepared for this trial?
I read the grand testimony of both the defendant and Mr. Raphael O'Connor. I went over all the exhibits and all the evidence that was was part of the record, and I went over the treatise, the treatises that were given inside the record.
Now, I would like to take a moment to talk to you about the defendant. How exactly is it that you know the defendant?
Well, I met Ms. Franklin when I had infiltrated the compound.
Did the defendant, I can't speak to that. Can you tell us a little bit more about life on the compound?
Yes. When I was living on the compound, I experienced very interesting rituals. They had isolation chambers, which they called meditation chambers. They would practice starvation, manual labor for hours on end. It was very interesting practices.
And did you notice anything else while you were on the compound?
Vague, Jackson vague.
Okay. I'm trying to get to the relationship. And like how?
Can you tell me about the relationship between these two people?
Okay.
You know,
I didn't not, that's
Paul
really.
may say, well, objection, there's been no indication they actually have a relationship.
He's like that. He's very much like
I
that.
know, they're very technically detailed.
Okay,
But I would say, that, you know, so you just say, well, did they have a relationship? Well, tell me about that relationship. So I think that's what you wanna know, ask it.
okay. Can you tell me more about the relationship between the defendant and Mr. O'Connor?
Yes, they had a very secretive relationship. There was a certain span of time where they began to spend time together alone away from the individuals in the compound, along with Brayler Griswold.
Objection, Your Honor. If they spent time alone, away from other individuals, how would this individual have any information about that? They were alone, away from other individuals.
Well, he could probably observe them going away. What I thought the objective was, how could they be alone when they're with this third party that you just described? You just said,
Yeah,
and
that
they're
was the
alone
biggest
with
thing.
this other guy too. So anyway, the three of them together, I got you. I know what's happening.
They kept to themselves.
You got the three of them out there, and she's suspicious. Go ahead.
And what about the presence of Baylor Griswold made this interaction suspicious to you?
Well, I contacted SID and I had them run his name through their database, and they found that
Objection? Hearsay? Somebody else found something and is gonna tell it, and she's gonna relate to us what they told her they found.
Your Honor, may I be heard outside the presence of the
Yes.
jury? If I may make an offer of proof, yes, I guess technically that's for later, but
Were you just showing her a document?
It's the investigation.
yeah,
that's the fingerprint analysis.
Yeah.
There's like a detailed investigation, if I remember correctly.
about the thing.
Yeah, that like
Is there an
I think it's
admissible
not.
document that gets this for you? I don't know, so you just tell me. If not,
It's
then you gotta
in,
get it from the witness.
it's in the witness's written expert report, or like that detailed investigation report.
Yeah, that's not an admissible document.
So I just wrote it down.
Could she ask, like, in your investigation, what did you find?
Well, you wanna know, you're trying to lead to, he finds out that this guy is a bomb specialist, and so he alerts them to something, he does something. So you're offering, I suppose, to show the effect on the listener as to what he was going to do, what his next steps were. You could make that argument.
Okay.
You're not offering it to prove the truth of the matter asserted that he has a past to show something. No. Or maybe you don't get it. Maybe you just go, yeah, they reported something back to me, and as a result of that, what did you do? Well, I kept my eye on these guys because I thought that they were making.
Okay. So, sorry, one moment. At that point, how did you know that something suspicious was going on?
Well, I witnessed Mr. O'Connor and Ms. Franklin leave the compound multiple times. And on other occasions, I witnessed Ms. Franklin and Baylor Griswold leaving the compound and coming back with big bags from a store.
What was inside those bags?
Well, I didn't get the chance to actually see the contents, but as I approached the bags and I started to look through them, Miss Franklin stopped me and she threatened me.
What did she say that was threatening? Or what did she do that was threatening?
She told me to mind my own business or Mr. O'Connor would find business to mind for me.
Yes. Your Honor, may I approach with Exhibit 4H, counsel?
Yes.
At this time, I would like to admit what is this? Sorry.
It's a text exchange between Mr. O'Connor and Alex Franklin.
Okay, Your Honor, at this time, I would like to admit Exhibit 4H into the record. It has already been stipulated as authentic.
All right, that's admitted.
May I publish copies to the jury?
Sure.
Lovely.
So if you may follow along silently, I'll read this aloud. This is a text from the defendant. You told me to let you know if Chris keeps asking questions with a question mark S. Well, he just approached me and asked about CRB. Mr. O'Connor responded K, Bay and I will handle, good job Lexi. And the defendant responded =, parenthesis with 7 exclamation points, if I can count correctly. What happened after that?
After I received this text, I didn't receive this text. After these text messages were exchanged, later on that day, I was sitting in my room, and then Mr. O'Connor, Ms. Franklin, and Baylor Riswell walked into my room, and Baylor hit me in the gut and it hit me really hard in the gut while Mr. O'Connor and Ms. Franklin watched.
And what did the defendant do?
The defendant stood there and watched. Then she stated that she stated that I'll need to leave before I mess with their plans.
And what happened after that?
I was locked in one of those isolation chambers for 2 days.
And assuming you were able to escape because you are here now, what happened after that?
Well, after I escaped, I grabbed my service weapon and my clothes, and I went to charge my cell phone because it had been dead for hours, and then I went to go look for O'Connor.
Were you ever able to find O'Connor?
I wasn't, but I broke into his home and while searching through his home, I looked into his personal trash can, and I found an addiction cap, PVC, and some explosives I believe to be C4.
Why were you looking through his trash can?
To find evidence of a crime. There's something was wrong, and I could tell. I was looking for evidence.
There's no suppression. Is there any stipulation here? This guy's breaking into the guy's house. Is an FBI agent breaking some guy's house to get evidence?
Typical FBI conduct, sir.
Especially like a warrant.
Gang of criminals, really.
Is this just gone by, or am I missing something?
No, I think there was nothing in the.
Nothing in there?
Yeah.
Okay. Is anyone gonna raise this?
Tom's having cocktails over there, right?
So maybe there's a motion to suppress that's a pre-trial motion.
Okay.
Could have been sued for malpractice.
On the defense side.
Sorry. So you just testified that you were unable to find O'Connor. Where was Baylor Riswald?
Well, when I left the home of O'Connor, I saw Baylor Riswald getting into a vehicle, and that's when I followed him.
How so?
I took one of the vehicles from the compound.
And what happened after you followed Riswald?
Well, I followed Riswald to a casino where we stayed for a few hours. It was maybe about 4 hours, where I watched him play slots.
And after that?
After that, I followed him back to the compound. It was about 4 in the morning. And once we arrived to the compound, I went to go check my phone, and I saw that SID had called me multiple times. And so I called SID to give them, to check in and ask them for an extraction.
Okay. And what happened after you were extracted from the compound?
As we were driving away, I saw the Central Reserve Bank in flames.
Just to clarify, where is the Central Reserve Bank?
It is in Syracuse, New York.
Your Honor, may I approach with pre-marked Exhibit 2?
Sure.
Counsel? What is that?
That is a picture of a bomb fragment from the crime scene.
Is it the same or substantially the same as the date that your investigation found this fragment?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, Your Honor, I move to have Exhibit 2 admitted into the record as it's already been stipulated as authentic.
Okay,
I'll leave that up here with you. May I publish copies to the jury?
you may.
Now, how is it so sure, or sorry, how are you so sure that it was a bomb that set off sorry, let me rephrase.
Hey, Fido, someone scratching your belly?
How are you so sure that it was a bomb that destroyed the Central Reserve Bank?
Beyond the evidence that I found within the compound inside Mr. O'Connor's trash bin, these fragments are consistent with a Irish pipe bomb, and these fragments were found at this crime scene.
Objection, Your Honor.
Yes.
Move to strike this. No foundation this individual is able to testify as to what is consistent with fragments of an Irish pipe bomb.
Does this agent so-and-so, whatever this agent's name is, have on reconstruction training of any kind? How do you know they're consistent? Perhaps I should ask a bigger question. Why are we spending so much time on proving that she did it, or that the place got blown up? Everyone agrees the place got blown up. I don't think anyone's going to fight that it was a bomb. If anyone fights anything about the evidence, it's pretty much only going to be the question of which of them did the triggering and stuff like that, I would think. So, you know, I just don't, I think we're spending an awful lot of time proving a piece of the case that we do have to put in enough to survive a directed verdict, but we don't have to spend a lot of time convincing the jury, because they're going to concede it all in a few minutes. So you have so you found a bomb, and the fragments are consistent, we'll say, with a pipe bomb, and similar to the pipe bomb that's in number 2. Are you going to do that next?
Your Honor, may I approach with Exhibit 5A?
Sure.
Counsel? What
5A's
is that?
in already, right?
No, it's not.
No, it's not yet.
This is a fingerprint analysis of the fingerprint found on the bomb fragment.
Is it the same or substantially the same as the date that you found this in your investigation?
Yes.
It is. Your Honor, I move to have Exhibit 5A admitted to the record. It is already been stipulated as authentic.
This one, there's already a prior order that it is admissible in this trial.
Yeah, because not only, because authentic doesn't get you there with this
Yeah.
one.
Okay, so.
This one is a police report, which is inadmissible under the hearsay rule,
Okay.
unless, of course, it's stipulated to the contrary.
Yeah, it's not even a stipulation. There's a prior order
An
that
order.
it is admissible in the trial.
Okay,
Okay.
all right, so.
So I don't have to ask for it to be admitted. I can just.
No,
say
you
this
do
is-
have to ask to be admitted. So, Your Honor, I offer to send the evidence, as Your Honor's already ordered, it is
Okay.
admissible without objection.
Okay. Okay. Your Honor, may I publish copies to the jury?
You may.
Now, what is that?
This is a fingerprint analysis report of the fingerprint found on the bomb fragment.
And how is it that you are sure that it was the defendant who had planted this bomb?
Well, when they did the fingerprint analysis, they compared it between 3 individuals, and the report found that there is a 99% likelihood that this fingerprint was made by Ms. Franklin.
Thank you. Now I want to take a step back for a moment, and I would like to talk about your.
Which, by the way, does not prove she planted it.
That's
It
right.
proves she had a finger on it at some point.
Objection. It's, in fact, the form of the question is objectionable, given the answer.
You said, how do you know she planted it? Which we
Oh,
don't have evidence
okay.
she planted it, actually, probably, except for the first guy, so maybe we can say it, because the first guy said it. But his answer was, well, that's her fingerprints, but that doesn't prove that.
Okay.
Do you see that? Do you see it? You
I
can
do,
put a
yeah.
print on anytime.
Yeah.
Oh, of course, you tried out with, what's his name, the guy that put his print on days earlier,
Yeah, the
right?
chocolate bar, yeah.
There you go. So-
Okay, sorry.
But all you need to do is prove the fact, and you just prove the fact. After that, what does that show? She has her fingerprint on the bomb fragment. That's all you need.
Okay.
And we know what that means.
Okay.
It's her.
Okay.
She did the bomb.
So now I'd like to take a step back for a moment and talk about your job with the FBI. How exactly did you earn the title of behavioral psychoanalyst?
Well, I did my undergrad at NYU, where I studied sociology, and then I pursued my master's and PhD at Columbia, where I studied psychiatry. My master's thesis has garnered lots of acclaim, and it's very famous.
All right, now I'm confused, because a little while ago you told me this guy is a psychiatrist. but he's not.
Yeah, you have an MD.
I'm a
And you need an MD to be a psychiatrist.
I
I don't know how you study psychiatry without an MD. You can study psychology without an MD, not psychiatry.
I believe that I have.
Doctorate.
I'm a doctorate. Do I have a doctorate in?
PhD doctor, I thought.
Is
I
it
was-
PhD?
Doctorate in psychiatry, it said.
A PhD? MD, what? Well, it does say Deputy Director Dalton Jones, MD, PhD, so that's what it says there, Dalton, MD. That's what it says?
No.
No,
You have a
Oh, that's
it's
something
master's,
Regan
else.
you
Lewin.
have a master's
That's
and
the
a
real
doctorate.
expert.
Got everybody's MD, PhDs in the FBI? That's quite an FBI.
Yeah, it says you have a master's and a doctorate in psychiatry from Columbia.
A
Didn't I say
doctorate
the
in
master's
psychiatry
in-
from Columbia.
So you have a master's and a doctorate in psychiatry from Columbia University.
Yeah.
Alright.
Did I not
That's
say
what,
that?
that's what it says. I don't think such a thing exists, but we'll pretend it does.
It does now.
All right. Sorry. So what did I say? So how does one become a behavioral psychoanalyst?
Tell me about your education, training, and experience. We're gonna make an expert, let's use the words of expert.
Okay.
Tell me about your education, training, and experiences.
Okay.
So I completed my undergrad in sociology at NYU, and then I pursued a master's and PhD in psychiatry at Columbia. At which point I studied. I completed my master's, and that master's thesis gained lots of acclaim.
Okay. Now, have you been made? The elements of Stockholm syndrome, and now I'm like my train of thought is totally derailed.
Have you ever heard of Stockholm syndrome?
What is Stockholm syndrome?
Stockholm syndrome is a disorder where the victim attaches themselves to the abuser.
And how does a medical professional test for Stockholm syndrome?
Well, just to be clear, Stockholm syndrome is not considered a viable diagnosis under the American Psychological Association, and therefore it's not part of the diagnostic manual for disorders, so it's not really considered a recognized disorder. But there is, within the community, individuals like to compare trauma binding with this. There's tests for trauma binding, but particularly in this case, we use the 4 elements of that are.
You're telling a jury they've never heard this before, so
Okay.
take it nice and easy, So there's no, in the DSM, there's no such thing as Stockholm syndrome, but there's another sort of thing that's called trauma bonding. That's all I do, that trauma bonding. And what that is someone who bonds with someone who's caused them trauma, essentially.
All of my exes, every single one.
When you hear all of this stuff, it's all battered spouse syndrome. It's
Yes,
exactly the same
yes,
as spouse
yes.
Okay, are we following?
Yeah,
All right.
we're following.
Simple. Let's be simple people.
Okay, really simple.
So you had mentioned that there are factors. What are these factors for testing for Stockholm syndrome?
Well, to say it simply, there are 4 factors. Threat, which means that the abuser physically or psychologically threatens their safety. Second, that there are small acts of kindness, and this could be anything from giving small gifts to ultimately saving them from dire consequences. The third is isolation. Isolation meaning that they are isolated from the viewpoints of others outside of the abuser. And the fourth is no escape, which is, this means that there is a perceived a notion that they cannot escape the situation that they are in.
And what factors need to be met in order to find that the defendant actually has Stockholm Syndrome?
All of them have to be met.
So all of them have to be met. You cannot have, I was leading, sorry.
You could just,
I think that this is just what I criticized.
Yeah,
I think you're being too rigid and too wooden about this.
Okay.
All of them have to be met. I
okay.
think these are 4 things that you look at and
Okay.
weigh
Mhm.
in making a determination. And here, 2 of them are lacking.
Okay,
That's all.
okay. So you said all 4 of them have to be met.
would you like me to rephrase?
Yes.
Okay. So there are 4 factors when you are considering Stockholm Syndrome as a diagnosis. You weigh them all equally when you're making this determination.
Okay. Are all 4 factors present in this case?
No, they're not actually.
What factors would you say are missing?
Well, the most major one is that that Miss Franklin was being abused by the subject of the Stockholm Syndrome, meaning that Mr. O'Connor was abusing Miss Franklin, but that's not, there is no evidence of that he was physically abusing Miss Franklin. And beyond that, Miss Franklin had every way to escape. So there was no abuse, and she had every means to escape.
So can I say, instead of how do they, about these 4 factors, why don't you just have, how do you know that she's not suffering from Stockholm abuse? Say, well, there's 2 of the 4 factors are missing, and then we skip all of, it just looks to me like you have this artificial checklist. You go, she has to have all 4, and she only got 3.5, she loses. That just doesn't feel right to me. It really is a balancing, mushy sort of concept, I think.
Okay.
So have her just do that. So, she points out the missing stuff. Well, don't do this, she has to have all 4, and she's missing 1.
Okay.
You say, well, how do you know she doesn't have it here? Well, there's 2 things that are missing.
Okay, so how do you know that the defendant does not have Stockholm Syndrome?
Well, when you balance all of the elements for Stockholm Syndrome, you find that Ms. Franklin doesn't have all of those required elements. The first being that the subject of her Stockholm Syndrome, Mr. O'Connor, did not abuse her physically. And the second being that she was free to escape at any point.
When you were at the compound, did you
Why is
ever?
it important that he was not the abuser?
Are you
I
asking?
mean, I know that's a factor, and I think that's a question that we have to answer here. It has to be not just, well, she doesn't qualify for the factor.
Okay.
It has to be, well, why is that of any significance that he was not the one who beat her? So we need to know that, and what would your answer be to that?
My answer?
Yeah, or your witness's answer that you're gonna give your witness.
That it needs to be the abuser, or the abuse needs to come from the abuse that needs to come from the abuser needs to be both psychological and physical.
Why do we need both? I don't understand that either. If I psychologically abuse you and just tear you down mentally, and then I'm nice to you every once in a while, and you go, oh, and then you've got no other options but me. Isn't that the same thing? In a human being's mind, where no matter what these doctors say, I think you have to show that she was not afraid of him. She's afraid of her dad. But the whole idea of Stockholm Syndrome, factor number 1, that you're abused, is you're afraid you're going to get the shit beat out of you or whatever all the time. And then they're nice to you, saying, oh, I think my dad would be nice to you. But, that fear is what counts. And so there's no reason, so what I'm saying is the fact that he's not the abuser is a technical thing. The meaning behind it is what's going to sell the jury. He's not the one who abused her. And so she's not afraid of him. And so she's not just going to do slavishly whatever he wants. That's the idea here.
Okay, so why is it important that
What's the significance of that fact? So, what's the significance of the fact that he is not the one who's hitting her? Right?
Okay. So yeah, what is the significance of the fact that Mr. O'Connor didn't actually physically beat the defendant?
Well, in the typical, very rare circumstances that Stockholm Syndrome does exist, there is almost always the fact that the abuser directly abuses the victim. In this case, there was no showing of that, and beyond.
Why do we care about that? Aside from the fact that somebody said that that was a criteria, you had to score 8 on your test. Is a criteria. Who knows what the fuck 8 is? I don't know. You have to do it. Why do we care about this, is what I'm asking you. And I thought I just explained it, but the witness didn't pick up there, right? What is the significance of the fact that he's a witness, that he is not the abuser? Why do we care?
She's not afraid of him. The abuser is her father. She clings to him for her safety, but her abuser is her father.
And you reviewed documents in order to prepare for this trial today. Did you review Dr. Pander's expert testimony?
I
Or
did.
expert report?
I did review her expert report.
Okay. And do you agree with Dr. Pander's finding that the defendant attached her fear of her father onto Mr. O'Connor?
I do not agree with that at all.
I didn't understand that when I heard it the first time.
Okay.
Why are you putting that in there? You're taking away something they may or may not argue. And this whole attached fear just sounds like bogus to me.
Okay.
Your point is, she's not afraid of him. They're going, oh yeah, she was afraid of him because Ray was his agent and stuff like that, so she's really afraid of him.
So
They're going,
that
she wasn't afraid of him, he never beat her.
that
He
is
was
the
her
point that
boyfriend.
I'm trying to get to, and I don't know how to word it to get it there.
I mean, that she's not afraid of him?
Yeah, and the
Okay,
defendant.
why is that significant? It's supposed to elicit that response, that she is, why does it matter that he's not the abuser? Well, because she wasn't afraid of him, she was afraid of Ray,
Okay.
but she wasn't afraid of the cult leader guy.
Mm,
He was her boyfriend. They were living together.
okay.
They were nice to each other. She's not afraid of him.
Okay.
How nice.
But that's your witness's answer. That's not your job
Yeah.
as a questioner. So witness, I hope you hear me.
Yeah.
It's your job to get the case out. On direct, the examiner doesn't say much. The witness says everything on direct.
Okay.
So remember, examiners, you have to cue your witness with your questions real nice, but it's the witness's job to do the job.
Okay. One second, I'm sorry, I just gotta recollect my thoughts.
So that was factor number 1. He's not the abuser. The reason that's important is she's not afraid of him, so she's not going to do whatever he wants.
What other factors are missing?
The fact that she was not able to escape is completely incorrect. I was even able to escape the compound when I was there, so it's possible for anyone to escape from the compound.
Okay.
So let's make that human too.
Yeah.
Why do we care about this? Of course she can escape, right? But she can't escape, right? Who's right on this? Is she really trapped or not? You have to think, well, why do we care about it? We care about this because we're saying this person had no alternatives, really, psychologically no alternatives, but to become the puppet of the leader.
Okay.
And the fact that she has nothing else means that she has no alternative. So when we bring our factors out, we have to explain their significance to the jury, and then we explain the significance in a way that the response, well, she could leave, she could get in her car and go. Not really, not the way we've explained it, because she had no practical alternative but to go along with this guy.
Okay. So then what is the significance?
But for you, of course, you couldn't. You wanted.
Yeah.
I had that backwards.
Yeah.
But so from your perspective, she was out and about all the time.
Yeah.
And really, there was no compulsion on her to stay. Could she have? Does she have skills she could make her way in? Well, she certainly had enough skills to make her way through college and have drinks with her friends and stuff like that. And college, she ought to have enough skill to get a job. Yeah, all right. That was the olden days, wasn't it?
So what is the significance behind anyone being able to take one of these cars and leave the compound?
Well, in this specific case for Miss Franklin, she was out in the community. I watched her leave with Baylor Riswald. They went shopping together. She was able to go out to university and spend time with her friends. She was definitely able to leave the compound on her own accord.
Okay. See, now I'm all types of.
What do you wanna go
So you've refuted that defense.
Yeah.
You've done your basic stuff. I'm not sure you got much of.
Yeah, I don't. I just basically have to. Okay, so then based on your observations, do you feel? Oh, why did I say? Sorry. Do you feel that the defendant was in any way? That's not how I want to phrase that. I'm so sorry. Okay, so then you know what? Based on your experience and based on your knowledge, training, and experience, have you formed an opinion to a reasonable degree of psychological certainty that the defendant has Stockholm Syndrome?
Whether or not, let's put it that way.
Whether or not the defendant has Stockholm Syndrome.
The defendant does not have Stockholm
Objection.
Basis?
702, Your Honor, we haven't heard that that the methods used in this case are employed reliably by other professionals in the field, and that there was fastidious adherence to the standards of psychological examination.
So you have an expert witness here, right? You did fine with education, training, and experience, right? You brought that out, as I recall. And then with regard to what the person based their opinion on, that did feel a little light. I think you did say, what did you review? And she said everything. But that's, yeah. And then, but now you need to show that the method by which this witness arrived at that conclusion is the way all psychiatrists, or should I say, PhDs in psychiatry, operate. But this is the scientific way of doing things. And how is that, by the way? What is the scientific way that this person employed here?
Those 4 factors.
Stockholm Syndrome.
I think they just reviewed records, right? The scientific method is how did you come to your conclusion?
So I believe what
What's the data you use? What is the data here? Isn't it just review of records?
And personal
Yeah.
observation.
Yeah.
She
What's it?
saw them
Yeah.
interacting.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. So,
Well, that's a big deal.
But if we're gonna go straight into like
Nope.
the
So how about, why don't you say, do you have an opinion? Yes, I do. What, and on what do you base your opinion? Well, I base my opinion on personal observation of her, as well as on the review of all these various documents. And is that a method? This is the question. And is that a method which is used by others in your field in this type of, I'm not getting the words exactly right. You ought to look at the words of the rule.
okay.
And you'll see there are words in there that they want you to use. And this method that is employed in the scientific, whatever it is.
I'm so, yeah, did you say 704?
702.
702.
I will tell you that I don't do this in the trials. I see this all the time. You're a good job, I do.
Just pass it. Did you use these things? Did you
Okay.
establish facts? That's the rule that you have to prove.
So, in order to form this opinion, is your opinion based on any scientific or technical or specialized knowledge?
Yes.
Yes.
We want just the methodology,
And methodology. Okay.
pieces of it that speak to methodology.
Okay.
You already proved credentials.
Okay.
Violent today.
It's like something like where the methods that you use, the methods that are accepted in the scientific community, something like that. I don't know exactly what it says in there.
You just ask, what methods did you use? She says, are those methods considered reliable by the psychiatric community? Yes.
Okay.
Something like that. And it's, the rule has criteria.
702,
Just don't
A,
remember
B,
them
C,
in my
D, and
head.
E.
Yeah.
They have words that you want to use. The more you can use the words of the rules, the more the judges will let you do things because they're following the rules.
Did you write down that? Someone's, good.
So is your opinion based on, or what methods is your opinion based on?
Well, I observed the two interacting with each other, and Dr. Pander's report on her findings.
And are those methods consistent with the standard set by other psychiatrists in the field?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So what is your opinion then?
Based on all the evidence that I reviewed, I do not believe that Ms. Franklin has Stockholm Syndrome.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Your opinion should not be you don't believe.
Oh, I should be like, no, she does not.
She does.
Special Agent Lewin, I want to talk to you about your claim that Alex Franklin does not have Stockholm Syndrome. Now, you mentioned before that the American Psychological Association does not recognize Stockholm Syndrome, isn't that right?
They do not.
But they do recognize a condition called trauma bonding.
That's correct.
And you would agree that most psychologists use the terms trauma bonding and Stockholm Syndrome interchangeably.
Can't speak for all other psychologists. I can only tell you that it's not a recognized diagnosis.
Well, certainly, Special Agent Lewin, you did review several treatises in preparation for this case, did you not?
I did, yes.
And one of those treatises was an academic article about cults and trauma. Let me back up. One of those articles was about cults, was it not?
Yes.
And in that treatise, it states that a majority of psychologists believe that use the phrases trauma bonding and Stockholm Syndrome interchangeably.
Objection, hearsay.
If I may be heard outside the presence of the jury,
Yes.
if I may make an offer of proof, the treatise that I'm referring to is a statement, is an article on cults. This would fall directly under Rule 803-18, which is the learned treatise exception.
But don't you need to establish a foundation for a treatise that the witness himself recognizes it as authoritative or otherwise it's recognized as
We can establish that foundation.
authoritative? Go ahead and do it. I wish I had my books. I think then, can you only read, can you only read the passage to them and ask them
You can
about
read
that?
these.
That you can read them into the record, but you can't admit them into evidence.
Right,
Let's see. Oh, actually, let me back up for a second. I was mistaken, and I thought it was in the report, but it is in the backup. Here we go. I'm approaching the witness with his report that was submitted to the court, page 27, counsel. Special Agent Lewin, that was your report that you submitted to the court in this case, isn't that right?
It is.
And directing your attention to the very back of that report, that is your signature, isn't that correct?
It is.
I want to direct your attention now to page 27, line 26 to 27.
Let's see. Page 27, line.
26 to 27. Please read silently as I read aloud. However, most psychologists and psychiatrists use Stockholm Syndrome and trauma bonding interchangeably, and trauma bonding is a recognized psychological diagnosis. Did I read that correctly?
It's an entire paragraph here, and I want to make sure that you're not truncating it inappropriately.
Well, it's the very last sentence on lines 26 to 27.
Okay.
Commissioner Parks retrieved.
You may.
In fact, you personally think that Stockholm Syndrome is a real psychological disorder, do you not?
Incredibly rare one.
But an actual recognized psychological disorder, correct?
There are at least factors to consider in order to diagnose it.
In fact, you saw in your past as an FBI agent someone who did have Stockholm Syndrome, isn't that right?
Which is why I know the defendant doesn't have it.
Well, let's talk about the reasons why you claim the defendant doesn't have Stockholm Syndrome.
I don't claim it, I know it.
Well, you first say that Alice Franklin does not have Stockholm Syndrome because she doesn't identify Raphael O'Connor as her abuser, isn't that right?
She doesn't.
And you also claim that she was capable of escaping, isn't that right?
So she's not capable of identifying him as his abuser because he was not her abuser. And there were plenty of opportunities for escape, so that is a necessary element. You have, in order to attach yourself to an abuser in the Stockholm Syndrome, you have to see them as no other option. And there are plenty of options.
So just so we're on the same page, those two things you're claiming were not met in this
That
case.
is what I identified as being critical failures to her being able to be diagnosed for Stockholm Syndrome.
But you
which
can
is why she didn't have it.
But you can see the remaining factors are met in this case, isn't that right?
It's not the way it works. It's not like you go through a checklist. You look to see if they have Stockholm Syndrome, and if there are things that prevent them from being able to attach themselves to an abuser, then they don't have it. It's not like, well, you got some, you got others. It's that you don't have it.
Well, let's make it clear for the jury. One of the factors is threats of physical and psychological abuse, right, from the abuser.
That is one of the factors you look at, yes.
The other factor is small acts of kindness.
So you have a fundamental misunderstanding of how this works.
Well, let's take a look at how it ultimately works.
Okay,
Now, you reviewed an article about cults, isn't that right?
I'm sorry?
You reviewed a treatise about cults,
Yes.
isn't that right? It was attached to Dr. Pander's expert report.
Yes, I reviewed that report.
And first you approached the witness with the treatise in question.
What is it? Which one?
Contemporary review of empirical and clinical studies of trauma bonding and violent or exploitive relationships. Special Agent Lewin, I want to, before we even talk about the content of this, you would agree that this article, which is published in an academic journal, is a reliable source, would you not?
I know that the defendant's expert relied upon it.
And you relied on it when you were reviewing the expert report.
No, I just used some of the wording in this to show that even under this, she wouldn't have a trauma bonding.
Well, let's talk about what it says inside of this particular treatise. Back up here.
I still think we may have a hearsay objection. I
Yeah.
don't think this witness is
You can
right.
object.
Hearsay, or objection, Your Honor, hearsay?
I don't think you got the witness to concede authoritativeness. Can you do it with just his report though? Do you really need to go to this other
I
guy?
can impeach him on the claim that he thinks it's not an accurate treatise.
Oh, all right, if that's true.
Special Agent Lewin, I'm going to approach with your report again. Page
So
27.
just, maybe you want to clarify, because he's a Weasley guy.
Sure.
Before you impeach him, just make sure he's not conceding
Sure.
authoritativeness if that's what you have in your hand.
Are you claiming that that article is not an authoritative source with respect to trauma bonding and Stockholm Syndrome?
No.
You are not let me back up. You are claiming that this is an authoritative source or is not an authoritative source.
I'm claiming that this is from an authoritative journal, and it was relied upon by the defendant's expert. I did not rely on it in coming up with my opinion.
Now, you would agree that it is an accurate articulation of trauma bonding and cult dynamics, would you not?
Which is why the defendant doesn't have Stockholm Syndrome.
Now, I want to take you to the second page of this article.
Right.
There's a section there, actually it's the last sentence before the very first paragraph. Do you see that? It
I'm
says,
sorry, the last sentence before the first paragraph?
excuse me, let me make it more clear. On line 5, at the very top, it says these factors include. You see that?
Yeah.
So it is described as factors, isn't it?
There are, like I said, there are factors to consider, but it's not a checklist.
And it lists each of those factors, does it not?
These are factors to consider.
Including, number 1, perceived threat to physical and psychological survival at the hands of the abuser.
Physical and psychological survival.
Number 2, perceived acts of kindness from the abuser to the victim.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3, isolation.
And number 4, inability to escape.
Correct. So I want to talk to you about the 2 areas that you do say don't show that Alex Franklin has Stockholm syndrome. Starting with your claim that Alex Franklin didn't identify Raphael O'Connor as her abuser. I'm approaching
As a physical abuser,
as a physical abuser.
which is one of the requirements here, physical.
We're going to talk about that. Put a cap on that. I'm approaching the witness with what's been pre-marked as Exhibit 9.
Mhm.
These are the medical records from Alex Franklin when she was at St. Joseph's Hospital, are they not?
Yes,
And you reviewed these in order to reach your conclusions in this case.
yes, they reference several instances in which the defendant was a liar.
We'll talk about that in 1 second. Your Honor, I ask this be admitted into evidence as Exhibit 9. Both parties have stipulated to its authenticity that it's a medical record.
All right. That's it.
Permission to publish copies to the jury. So, Special Agent Blue, I want to talk to you about certain portions that are in this medical record, starting on page 1. Now that's dated October 11, 2016, isn't that right? It says current date.
Yes.
And then there's a section that says notes. And in that note section, it says that Alex Franklin has a sprained wrist. Correct?
Yes.
She says she has localized trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
Slight bruises on other parts of the arm.
Mm-hmm.
She then is asked about the cause, and she claimed a lacrosse injury, right?
And that she was possibly lying.
Right. I want to take you to page 2. Now that one is dated May 11th, 2017. Correct?
Yes.
And that one says in the notes section that she had lacerations to her left arm.
Yes.
It says she had to get 8 stitches,
Mm-hmm.
and that she said that she was hurt while working on a farm.
It says she has a suspicious story.
Right. I turn to page 3. That one is dated June 10th, 2018. Isn't that right?
June 10, 2018, yes.
And in the notes section, it calls Alex Franklin her current patient.
Yes.
It says that she has severe bruising on her arm, right?
Yes.
Bruising in her sternum,
Yes.
2 cracked ribs.
Yes.
It then goes on to say that the doctor believes it's possible domestic violence.
Yes.
And then she's referred to Dr. Leslie Panda for evaluation.
Right. Who is a psychologist?
So I want to talk to you, permission to retrieve and publish to the clerk's bench.
What do you want to do?
Oh, retrieve
Publish
it.
to the clerk's bench. I never heard of that.
Okay.
But
Publish to the
nevertheless,
clerk?
all right, first off, this retrieve stuff, don't even bother, leave it
All right.
up there, who cares?
Okay.
Right now, and then if you do want to do it, you just say, Your Honor, can I get that? Can I get that for the clerk?
Sure.
You guys are too messy to be leaving it with people. Take it back, put it in an organized fashion.
Got it. All right. So. Now, you concede that Alice Franklin was being physically abused by her father, right?
Yes.
But what you claim is it wasn't Raphael O'Connor who was putting his hands on her, right?
He did not ever physically abuse her as far as we know.
But you are aware that in June of 2015, Raphael O'Connor ordered Ray Franklin to assault Alice Franklin.
No, I'm not aware of that.
You reviewed the affidavit, the voluntary statement of Alice Franklin, right?
Who's a known liar?
Well, let's talk about some other people you claim are known liars.
Okay.
Raphael O'Connor. Isn't it true
Yes.
that you think Raphael O'Connor is a master manipulator?
Yes, he runs a cult.
In fact, you think he's a sociopath.
He runs a cult that is designed to take down an entire framework of society. It sounds like a sociopath to me.
Right. So, going back to this particular case,
Yeah.
you are aware that there are claims that Raphael O'Connor ordered Ray Franklin to assault Alice Franklin, right?
From a liar, I didn't consider that to be a reliable source of information.
Okay. want to talk to you about your other claim that Alex Franklin was incapable of escaping, had opportunities to escape. So you mentioned before that she had, that there were cars on the compound, right? That she could drive away whenever she wanted to.
That's right.
But she got to that compound when she was 13 years old. Isn't that correct? And she was there from 13 to 19 years of age.
Yes.
And throughout that entire time, she was being taught at that compound, like you just said, that capitalism is evil.
Okay.
That,
She was also taught how to drive.
well, she didn't have a license, did she?
That doesn't stop her from getting into the car.
Well, let's talk about what she would have done after she got into that car. She wasn't taught how to work in return for money, right?
Well, she was taught skills that are marketable.
Like working in a garden, right?
There are things called farmers, they make money.
All right. I want to talk to you, well, no further questions.
Redirect.
Mm,
Jeff, do you have anything good? What do you got for plans? Something he did that you can whack him with? Because otherwise.
No, Jeff necessary.
Keep your eye out there. You always want one thing that he did. You always want to return it back. So that's what you always does. But not everything else. You don't want to do big redirections. One thing. Next witness.
Your Honor, the prosecution rests case in chief.
All right. Judge has a motion tonight. Let's go on.
Your Honor, defense calls Dr. Leslie Pander to the stand. Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name for the jury?
Yes, my name is Leslie Pander.
Ms. Pander, what do you do for work?
I am a psychiatrist who works at St. Joseph's Hospital.
So I want to talk about how you ultimately became a doctor at St. Joseph's Hospital. What is your education and training experience?
I have 4 degrees. First, I started and got my bachelor's degree in psychology. I went on to get a master's in both psychology and psychopharmacology, and then I went on to get my PhD in psychiatry.
After you got your PhD in psychiatry, what was your first form of employment?
After I got my PhD, I went on to work for the FBI.
And while you were working with the FBI, what did you do?
I worked with a specialized unit that evaluated the psychological profile of violent persons.
So how long were you with the FBI for?
I was with the FBI for 15 years, and then afterwards I left and moved to Syracuse, New York, where I am now. And I have my private practice and I work for the hospital.
Now, how are you involved in this case, Dr. Pander?
I offered my services after I learned through watching TV that Alex Franklin had been arrested.
And
For
did you prepare, let me back up. Were you familiar with Alex Franklin before you saw her on the news?
Yes, I had treated her before.
And in what context were you treating her?
I was treating her when she came to St. Joseph's Hospital. The first time I met her was in 2015 when she came in and seemed to show injuries resulting from self-harm.
Now, I want to talk to you about the conclusions you reached in this case. Did you prepare a report in this case?
Yes.
And what materials did you review in preparation for that case?
I reviewed a number of materials. I reviewed different treatises that discuss Stockholm Syndrome, and treatise is a fancy word for articles and scholarly materials discussing Stockholm Syndrome. I also reviewed all of the exhibits and testimonies that are in the record.
And Dr. Pander, what methods did you apply in coming to your conclusions in this case?
There is a standard method used to analyze whether or not a person has Stockholm Syndrome, and I used that method.
And how reliable is the method you applied in this case?
The method is held as the golden standard for evaluating whether or not someone has Stockholm Syndrome.
Now, I want to talk to you about I want to give you some give the jury some background on what Stockholm Syndrome is and what criteria are necessary in order to meet it. Your Honor, I'd ask the witness to be allowed to step down and use a whiteboard as a demonstrative.
Yep, that may.
So Dr. Pander, I want to talk to you.
Your Honor, may I move to get a better look at the evidence?
If you need to, it looks like you can see it from here.
Dr. Pander, I want to talk to you about Stockholm Syndrome. Could you explain to the jury what Stockholm Syndrome is?
Yes, can I start by writing it?
Yes, that way we get all the spelling right. So, what is Stockholm Syndrome?
So Stockholm Syndrome is a phenomena where the person who is being abused ends up falling in love and feeling very affectionate towards their abuser.
And you mentioned before that there is a method that's used to determine whether or not someone can be diagnosed with Stockholm Syndrome. So what are those criteria that have to be met?
So there are 4 criterion.
And what's the first one?
The first one I'm writing on the board is isolation.
What's the second criteria?
The second criteria is that there is no escape.
And the third?
Number 3 is that there is a threat of abuse.
And what's the fourth criteria?
The fourth is that there is acts of kindness, but I'm just going to write kindness.
So I want to take each of these factors one at a time to determine whether they're met in this case, starting with isolation. Now, why is isolation important in your analysis here?
It's important to see that there is isolation because it shows that the abuser has prevented the victim from talking to other people or having any access to another community or another resource.
Based on the materials you reviewed, was Alex Franklin isolated?
Yes.
Why?
Because she wasn't able to foster any other relationships. She wasn't able to easily leave the compound, which was a very good example.
And if you could write on the right side of the board a brief summary of what we talked about.
So I'm just going to write she had no friends and she couldn't leave the compound.
Okay. I want to talk to you about that second factor, that there's a perceived inability to escape. Why is that important in this case?
It's important in this case because even though some may say that Alex could escape by just getting in a car, there was a belief that if she escaped, something bad would happen to her, and that ties into the third element.
So was that factor, no escape, ultimately met in this case?
Yes.
And if you could write on the board a summary of what we talked about.
I'm going to write she feared escape.
No life skills, no drama.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Why was the no escape factor met in this case?
The no escape factor was met because even if Alex Franklin could conceivably get a car and leave, she had no idea how to function outside the compound and had no life skills.
And if you could write on the right side of the board, no life skills.
Yes.
Now, that third factor, threats of abuse, we heard from Special Agent Lewin that because Raphael O'Connor wasn't personally assaulting Alex Franklin, she didn't identify him as his abuser. Is that true in this case?
That's not quite how it works.
Well, how does it work?
So even if O'Connor wasn't the one who laid his hand on Franklin, that doesn't mean that he didn't cause physical abuse. Should I continue?
Please.
in this case, it was very clear that O'Connor understood that if he was mad, Ray, which is Alex's father, would hit her.
Objection. Assumes facts, not evidence.
That is which, that
That
Ray hit her?
O'Connor was mad, then Ray would hit her.
Oh, all right, I don't know. I don't know if that was in evidence or not.
Your Honor, assuming being heard outside the presence of the jury,
Yes.
during the cross-examination of Special Agent Lewin, it was discussed how Alex Franklin claims that Raphael O'Connor directed Ray Franklin to assault her. So there are facts and evidence that discuss this issue.
Your Honor, it was asked whether that was true, and the witness said no. That is the only time that's been referenced in trial today, and the witness did not agree that that was true.
If I may respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
The witness did not say that that fact was not true. She said it was not a credible claim from Alex Franklin. He did concede that that was a claim that was being made by Alex Franklin. So there are facts and evidence. That's a credibility determination for the jury, so it is a fact with an evidence.
All right, so this is an expert witness here?
That's correct.
And so an expert witness can base their opinion, I suppose, on related facts as well, but before you ask them the question, the expert has to relate them. So if it assumes facts that are not in evidence, it would have to be the expert. You would have to have the expert relate those facts before you can put them into the question and assume them. Oh? So
What do I have to say?
So you have to say that whatever the fact is that's missing, which I'm not entirely clear on, because I heard something about somebody denied that it was said and stuff.
The fact is that if Ray O'Connor, or if Raphael O'Connor was upset, then Ray would hit Alex, and Raphael O'Connor knew that.
Okay, and who says that? That's the defendant says that? And you said that, and you read that somewhere?
I think I say it too.
Well, you can't say it, but you don't
But you
know.
have to have some fact.
Yeah, I think it's just based on my review. I think that's all that I say in the report. Is
If, in any event, we have to have the foundation of that come out. We never had on direct the idea that the abuse was directed because of anger. We heard the only thing that was asked in question was, was there an individual instance
Right.
of physical abuse being directed by Snagglepuss, whatever his name is.
Especially
Tom refused to cop to that.
So I can just avoid saying that entirely if we can't nail it down right now.
Okay.
So I can say, in this case, Raphael O'Connor doesn't have to physically hit Alex or the defendant. She just has to believe that there is a threat to her person, that if she does something wrong, get physically hurt.
Right.
Or specifically, if O'Connor is upset, then she will get hurt.
Okay.
We'll work out the.
Based on my review of the materials, Ms. So-and-so has said that this is what happens. So you can base your stuff on review of the materials.
Okay.
Should I just do that?
You're an expert.
Yeah.
Okay, based on my review of the materials, it seems that if O'Connor was upset with Alex, he would send her father to go hit her. So even if he didn't physically hit her, she somehow got physically hurt if he was upset.
Okay.
Better?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes. And if you could write on the right side, Ray Franklin and Raphael O'Connor.
How about if I write that Ray Franklin acted as the weapon?
Sure.
Or Ray Franklin equals the weapon?
Sure.
Olive oil.
Finally, I want to discuss that last factor, small acts of kindness. Why is that important in your analysis here?
It's important because when you see small acts of kindness, that factors into all of these other factors and how they operate.
So based on the facts that you reviewed, did Raphael O'Connor show small acts of kindness to Alex Franklin?
Absolutely.
Why?
I found that there were small acts like giving her a phone or just sort of treating her differently than others. He kept her very close. He had a very close relationship with her. He showed acts of kindness.
Why do they want small there? One of them was a big act of kindness.
Right.
Yeah, maybe we just.
So instead of saying small, just acts of kindness.
Small, do you? I mean, for the syndrome to work, somebody just has to be afraid of somebody and then they're nice to them sometimes. It's the
Right.
alternating of nice and mean.
Okay, I'll just grab small. So there were definitely acts of kindness. One included having a phone. And when you see those small acts of kindness, it shows that the abuser or the abused or the victim is fostering affectionate feelings or falling in love with their abuser.
Based on the facts you reviewed, did Alex Franklin fall in love with Raphael O'Connor?
In my opinion, it seemed that she did fall in love with him.
Why?
Because she wanted to be in a romantic relationship with
Is
him.
that why did she do it, or why do you say that?
Why
Why do you say that?
All right, that's better.
Maybe more specific.
Yeah.
So why do you say that Alex Franklin fell in love with Raphael O'Connor?
It seemed that she, or they had a physical relationship. She wanted to be close to him all the time. It just seemed as if she really cared about him.
Okay.
She wanted to make him happy.
Weren't they living together as boyfriend and
Yeah,
girlfriend?
they were living together.
That's pretty much, she's affectionate.
Yeah, okay.
Affectionate.
And if you could write on the right side of the board,
Right, they lived together and he gave her a phone.
Okay. So, Dr. Pander, you can be seated now. Your Honor, I'd ask to preserve this demonstrative for closing arguments.
Those- They want to mark on it, they probably can. So,
Now, Dr. Pander, I
I
want
can't
to...
see anything unless you.
Oh, yeah, let me move this out of the way. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Pander, I want to combine these four together. So based on your knowledge, training, and experience, and after reviewing the facts of this case, have you formed an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to whether Alex Franklin did or did not have Stockholm Syndrome?
Yes.
What was that opinion?
In my opinion, she did have Stockholm Syndrome at the time that she detonated the bomb on May 23rd.
Now, what does it mean for someone to have Stockholm Syndrome, psychologically speaking?
Psychologically speaking, it means that they don't understand, their thoughts really aren't their own. They're kind of brainwashed and they do everything possible to make the abuser happy.
No further questions?
Is that enough to get you by the instruction? There's undoubtedly an instruction on, the mental state required for exoneration here. And I don't know if the answer you just got fit that instruction well enough.
Okay, so
Make sure
I'll
that-
take a look at that.
Make sure whatever that instruction
Sure.
is,
Tracks.
those words come out. of it.
Got it.
Who's doing this cross? You are? You're doing the cross?
Yes. If I can have one moment, Your Honor.
Yeah, sure, I mean, if they're moving so fast.
So in your testimony, you state that you believe that the defendant does have Stockholm Syndrome,
Yes,
but you also acknowledge that the condition isn't actually recognized by the American Psychological Association.
it is recognized by the majority of psychologists. We just don't call it Stockholm Syndrome as the diagnosis, we call it trauma bonding.
You had also testified that you need to show 4 factors in order for Stockholm Syndrome to actually be present in a case, correct?
There are 4 factors that would lead one to conclude that somebody is a victim of trauma bonding.
And if a single factor is not met, then there is not Stockholm Syndrome present in a case, correct?
I mean, there's a weighing of each factor, but it's the diagnosis of the medical professional. So you would consider each factor in making that determination.
But you had also previously just testified that it is the golden standard that the 4 factors must be met in order to establish that there is Stockholm Syndrome, correct?
Those are the 4 factors to consider.
Okay. Now, you had also testified that the defendant had no life skills and therefore had no escape, correct?
She did not have a significant amount of life skills, and that is one of the reasons why I considered that she did not have the ability to escape.
But she had skills enough to get herself into college.
It's a community college, so I don't think it required very many skills in order to get in.
That's debatable. A college education is still a college education. However, she did have, she did
Was
have.
that a question?
No, it was not. I'm
Okay,
just being sorry.
just in case somebody cared over there.
Apparently not.
And we heard in previous testimony that the defendant was able to leave the compound every day to go to college, correct?
Well, not every day, no.
Every day that there was class.
As far as I know.
She was brought there. by
She was
a
brought
company.
there every day. She
No,
still had
that's
the ability.
Tom's line, you don't like that line.
She still
You
had
don't-
the.
You don't want Mr. Cult Leader, keeping his eye on her all the time.
She had a community that she could go see at this college, correct?
No, she wasn't able to see the community. In fact, the Mr. O'Connor repeatedly prevented her from interacting with that community. Which goes to the element of isolation.
The defendant, however, had stated in text that she was able to form study groups.
She was not permitted to participate in them.
However, she still formed these groups. There is actually also in a later text.
Objection, Your Honor, just ask the witness if you're allowed to answer the question that's being posed.
Yes, you
If they have a question.
sustain.
Okay.
In other words, don't just say something and go on to do the next question. Responded to by the witness.
If I could turn your attention to Exhibit 4D that's already in the record.
Okay.
Is it up
You'd
there?
have to give it to
I
me.
should be. It should already be up there, which is why I couldn't find anything. Is it on the left or right side? That's why I couldn't find anything, because they're all up here. So I would like to turn your attention to 4C and 4D.
Okay. Hold on, let me. Okay.
In Exhibit 4C, the defendant calls this group of people that she is inquiring about studying with her study group, meaning she has been able to form connections and have conversation enough so that they could make these plans to study, correct?
No, because he says, no, you can't do that.
Prior to her asking him.
I don't have anything that suggested that she actually participated in a study group.
Turning to Exhibit 4D, she names someone specifically, calls someone Stacy, meaning she had been able to form a connection enough to be on a first name basis with someone.
Objection, calls for speculation, argumentative.
Yeah, maybe, although I just think your witness would give a better answer than if we just strike it, so I wouldn't have bothered objecting, but I do suggest that I think all of these emails are not helpful for you.
Okay,
I would cut this line of questioning.
okay.
I agree you should be saying that she gets to go to school and sit in class and talk to her classmates and hang out with them, while she's at school and nobody's there looking over her shoulder.
Okay.
But I don't agree that you should be saying, see, she's on a first name basis with this person, because then Tom can go, yeah, she's not allowed to see him.
Okay.
By Mr. Meany over here, you see that?
So. The defendant had a phone, right?
That that Mr. O'Connor gave her and instructed her on how to use it.
The defendant had a phone that other numbers could go in, correct?
I don't know what you mean by that.
The defendant had the capability of putting other people's phone numbers in this phone.
I don't know if she actually had permission to do that.
Permission is not, how do I say this? I'm not asking about her permission, I'm asking about her capability. She did have the capability of putting other numbers in this phone,
I
right?
don't think she had the capability of doing anything without permission.
Is this a phone that can store more than 2 numbers in it?
More than 2 numbers?
Yes.
I'm not an expert in phones. I can't answer that with authority.
Because you're trying for too much.
I know.
You're trying to get more, remember, all you can get out of an opposition witness is
Yeah.
what they've said before, and
Okay.
anything that would be totally ridiculous to deny. Those are the only things.
Okay.
But if they've said it before, or if it would be so like, like, well, when the sun's out, it's light out, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay.
Well, it's clouds, but you know what I'm saying. It has to be ridiculous to deny. So what can you get him on that he can't deny? She went to school every day.
Okay.
Well, not every day. She went to school.
Yeah.
And while she was there, he wasn't there.
Mhm.
He doesn't know what she was doing while she was there.
Okay.
She could do whatever she wanted while she was there.
Mhm.
And I'd say, well, no, but she was brainwashed. But she sat next to people, she could talk to them in class, right? Oh, but she was brainwashed. But she went out to eat at cafeterias with her friends, right? Yeah, but she was told she wasn't allowed to do that. But she did it. Go back and forth with them on
Okay.
that, on the things that you have that he can't deny,
Okay.
which is not a lot. So cut your exam down.
Yeah. Now, the defendant had a bank account, right?
She did not have a personal bank account, no.
The defendant had a bank account in her name at the Central Reserve Bank, right?
That was what she was instructed to open, so that way Mr. O'Connor could scope out the bank.
There was money in this bank account, right?
It was the defendant. It was Mr. O'Connor's money.
It was in the defendant's name, right?
Well, she was the distraction, so she would have been opening it in her.
So the defendant had the capability of writing checks in this bank account, right?
I'm actually not aware of whether or not she had a checkbook.
Can I? Coach in any better thing. Okay, cool, never mind. And in order to open this bank, which, because it is in her name, and I'm assuming this other federal system warrants have to be there to open a bank account in your name. I know, I'm like really
She's just-
struggling to, I'm struggling to articulate, so I'm doing the talking right now. She had, in order to open this bank account, she had to speak to someone, right?
Well, I don't know, but
The knowledge of the witness, it's going into the way banks work, not the way
Okay.
Stockholm syndrome works.
Okay.
Just generally on scope.
Alright. You said yourself that this is an unconventional example of Stockholm syndrome.
yes,
And in fact, you said that Alex should have attached to her father.
she should have, and she might have as well. I mean, you
Because-
have more than one attachment.
Objection, and ask the witness again, be allowed to answer the question.
Because he was the one who threatened her,
Who?
her father.
Her father did threaten her as well as Mr. O'Connor.
Physically, her father was the one who had beat her.
Her father beat her. Mr. O'Connor often directed the beating.
You've been wrong before in your life, right?
All right, cut that question.
You've been wrong about Alex as your patient before, right?
Why do you want to set it up that way? That's it's like a sucker punch play. It's like, all right, I'm going to smack you in a minute. I'm just setting you up for it. You've been wrong before, haven't you? No, I've never been wrong before. All right, well, here, I'm going to smack you. No, just go to the thing.
Okay.
You don't need to be an ass about it.
I
You
will
said-
take responsibility, I told her to say that. so-
Exactly.
She's not,
All
yeah.
right. That's a wise ass question, isn't it? Do you recognize that? You've been wrong before.
I mean, it would be the first time for me, so.
Go ahead.
You said in your report that you should have had Child Protective Services look into.
You may want to stand up when you make objection.
Objection, your side, as to what was said in the report.
Your Honor, may I be heard outside the presence of the jury? This is, what is it, it's 8:00. If I may make an offer of proof, this is the, witness's, own observation as to,
Which he can certainly testify to, but he can't testify to something he said before.
You don't need that though, do you?
Just ask me the thing.
She's not listening. You don't need someone to well, first of all, back up. He can't testify, he can testify to what he observed. He can't testify to what he said outside this courtroom before. So anything he wrote down before he arrived in this courtroom, similarly, is hearsay.
Okay.
Can't testify to. However, whatever he wrote down before, he's almost certainly to admit those same facts now.
Okay.
So if he said before, the light was red in his deposition, you don't go, so in your deposition, you said the light was red. You say, the light was red, wasn't it? And if he
Okay.
denies it, you whack him with his deposition.
Okay.
That's the way that
that
prior
makes sense,
testimony
okay.
works.
So you should have had Child Protective Services look into Alex's case before.
Yeah, I really should have.
You should have, and you didn't.
I didn't see all the information that I have now, and had I seen that, I would have diagnosed this Stockholm Syndrome sooner
You,
and gotten Child Protective Services involved, and maybe it would have prevented the bombing.
You did better with that. You are now saying that she was abused. You're a mandated reporter. I don't know if we have that.
No, I don't think we do.
Probably, but you know, you should have reported abuse, child abuse, if you saw it, right? But you didn't report it. Isn't it true, sir, that you are only making this up now?
You also impeach and say, is it your testimony here today that you didn't think it was bad enough? Because in the report, she says, Alex is a liar, a very skilled liar. That's what you want to get out, right? Yeah, so if she's testifying, oh, I just didn't know that it was that bad, it's like, no, you said she was a really good liar. That's
I don't understand. That's why he didn't report?
in the
He didn't report because he didn't believe her?
report, it said,
He was
Anders
tricked.
says that she was tricked.
yeah.
And that Alex was such a good liar that Pander didn't understand just how serious it was and that she should have called DCF.
Okay, so then that's what you guys say. Now you should you agree that you should have called Protective Services. I don't think DC.
No.
Protective Services.
Why do we want this testimony on plaintiff?
We are as prosecution is showing that she was not under his influence.
That it's not.
And so if Doc says he was that she was under his influence because he's an abuser and stuff, but didn't report the abuse, that's inconsistent with his current testimony. Because he's now saying she was abused. He didn't say she was abused before.
But the testimony we're getting out is that she was in fact abused before and he failed to report it. I don't think that helps us.
So we are conceding abuse. So
I-
the fact that he didn't report it, what does that go to?
It's the fact that,
Just that he thought she was a liar?
and
that's
it's
all
like
we're gonna
incredibly
do?
convincing liar.
Okay, so we don't need the reporting at all, then, really.
Okay.
You just say, now let me ask you something. You knew all of this before, right? And yet you didn't report any of this to the authorities, did you?
Okay.
And you didn't report it because you thought she was lying about it, didn't you? You thought she was a very convincing liar.
Okay.
Guess I'm done with that.
Yeah.
All right, so anyway, anything else
Uh,
in this witness?
no further questions, Your Honor.
Hey, okay, do we have any more witnesses?
That's right.
Yeah, me.
Yes, Your Honor, at this point, we'd like to call Alex Franklin to the
All
stand.
right, let's let's get Alex up here, let's find out whether she really is under the influence of this guy.
That should be under some influence,
Just
not this
wait.
one.
Just now.
What is all this about Sweden anyway?
It's cold there.
Yeah. That's part of the syndrome, I'm not sure. It's gotta be cold.
Could you please state your name for the court?
My name is Alex Franklin.
Can I stop right there for just 1 second though? Everybody's doing this, right? Can I get a better first question than oh, my favorite was, would you state your name and occupation for the record? Doesn't that sound like a bunch of lawyers who don't even like the person they're speaking to? But if you like, your opening question should be, would you tell the jury your name, please?
Okay.
They turn and they go, my name is so-and-so. Yeah, what do you do for a living, sir? You know, you could say, what is your occupation, if you wanted to be more lawyer-like, and turn everyone off. But if you wanted to be like a human, what do you do for a living? Okay, I do this, that, and the other. You see what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
that opening question should not, and nothing's for the record. If you ever say for the record, only one time you should ever say for the record, and that's when the criminal defendant is identified. Other than that, I don't like record. It just reminds everyone that you're a lawyer, and this is really all being tried for the appellate court, and your jury don't matter anyway. Let's get a record in here. Get a record.
Could you please tell your name to the jury?
My name is Alex Franklin.
Could you tell them why you're here today?
I am being accused of blowing up the Central Reserve Bank.
Did you?
Yes.
Could you
Let's
explain
go.
why? Could you explain why?
Then why didn't you plead guilty? That's the question.
Yeah.
I didn't do that. I didn't do that. Yes, I did. Then why didn't you plead guilty? Well, because I didn't really know what I was doing.
Oh yeah.
How's
So,
that?
so why didn't you plead guilty?
Because I didn't really know what I was doing when I did it.
When you're entered a plea or when you blow up the bank?
Apparently both.
Alright, Ms. Blanken, what if any diagnosis did Dr. Pander give you?
She
Wait,
diagnosed.
wait, wait.
Do you want me to?
I would like you to have this witness tell her story now,
Okay.
right? Remember, the first thing you do is introduce the witness. Hi, I'm so-and-so, you know, and I'm the defendant, and yeah, I did the thing, but I didn't know what I was doing. Okay, we got the basics out. Let's go to her story. Where do we want to start her story? I'd put her when her 13. I'd say, I want to take you back to when you were 13 years old. What was life like then? Well, I had my dad, and he was kind of abusive and stuff, and he was kind of in that case. So this commune. Well, tell me about this commune. Well, first we had to give up all our stuff. What did you have to give up? Oh, my favorite little, what should I call it? Whatever. I mean, I don't know what you have in the record to play with,
Yeah.
but I want to hear the story of this poor displaced child, and as she grows up, and how she's brought into this cult. I want to hear that as a story happening little by little. So let's hear what happened.
Ms. Franklin, I want to bring you back to when you were 13. What was life like then?
Well, it was really hard. My mother had just passed. She was killed in a robbery of the Central Reserve Bank. And my father went a little crazy after that. He started taking us to like these grief meetings, and those grief meetings slowly started turning into covenant meetings. So things were a little weird.
Hey, so what can you tell me about that first covenant meeting?
Well, that was the first meeting that we met Mr. O'Connor. He was I remember him being very charismatic, and I liked talking to him. It felt nice talking to him. And I remember my father had like a 2-hour-long conversation with him or something like that after the meeting. And then after that, my father told me that we needed to pack up all our things and we were going to move to the compound.
How did you respond?
I did not want to move there at all. I told him that I wasn't going to go.
And what did your father do?
He beat me.
Ms. Franklin, regardless of the fact that a child like yourself does not deserve abuse at all,
Objection, Your Honor. Could we get to a question?
let me rephrase, if I may
Sure,
rephrase.
go ahead, and by the way, don't let that intimidate you, just because he's an old experienced guy and objects, doesn't mean he's right. And maybe he is technically, but if I'm on the jury, I'm thinking, what's wrong with that? And why is that lawyer being such an asshole?
I didn't have lunch.
I have an apple if you want it.
But you see what I mean? Remember that what's playing,
Okay,
always,
yeah,
what's always
yeah.
what you're doing is you're playing to these guys over here and they don't know the rules like you do.
Okay.
They don't know the rules. You know, they know the judge is sort of like a really important, relatively neutral person, and they look a lot to what the judge has to say and do. But beyond that, they don't know what's going on out here. You want to appear to be the non-lawyer. All these guys are lawyers, but you're the only human being out there. And you're just being nice and trying the best you can to accommodate everybody. But you got to get these points across that you get to explain your stuff to the jury. That's all. Very simple stuff.
Okay.
All right, so no lawyers here, please.
Ms. Franklin, what were the circumstances behind your abuse while you were living in the compound?
Normally I would,
I didn't hear she lost all her shit when she got here.
yeah.
Oh, so establish that first? Okay, and then
Yeah,
before?
yeah, well, that's
Okay,
what-
yeah.
So what happened to your, so what happened?
So
When you moved in, did you bring your stuff?
So Ms. Franklin, after that night, did you move into the compound?
Yes.
What was life like on the compound?
Really hard. The days were really long. We woke up at like 4 or 5 a.m. Would have morning or would do chores for hours and then have morning meditation and like a quick breakfast and then would go to school or go to work depending on who we were on the compound and then would immediately after school or work more chores until late in the evening and then dinner and evening lecture or meditation and then bed. So.
And what were some conditions for joining the compound?
We had to give up all of our like possessions. So my father gave his car to the compound. Couldn't really have anything that it was like personal basically.
Okay. So Ms. Franklin.
And on the defense side, isn't our position, not that it's all being given up to the guy who's the leader? We want everything to be, and what did you do all day? Well, we did whatever he wanted us to do. We got up and we did this. Followed his command. Everything should be in this description now, how this guy is the charismatic honcho leader, and everybody thought he was just like God. And we all did his bidding.
So who set the rules for the compound?
Mr. O'Connor.
And as part of those rules, there were punishments, isn't that? Were there punishments?
What happened when you broke the rules?
What happened when you broke those rules?
Well, there were these things called practices. So depending on what it was, sometimes it would be fasting, sometimes it would be locked in an isolation chamber to, I guess, sit there and think about, getting rid of your capitalistic urges and, yeah. So.
More detail on fasting. I would like to know. I don't know if it's in the record, but if it is there, I would like to know. What does that mean, fasting? How long did you not get food? Did you get water? Did you get anything? What, more detail on that if we have it. If not, we don't. Okay. Similarly, on the deprivation, the isolation chamber. I mean, I happen to know more about that because we talked about it before. But I want to know what's that. They take your clothes, they put you in there. You're in there for days, whatever it is. It gets hot. There's no air conditioning. It's just the vents up there. You're in the porta potty, it must kind of smell. I'm just thinking to myself, at least you get to go to the bathroom. You're not locked someplace you can't go to the bathroom. It's very convenient for that respect.
Yeah.
So these are things this witness should be saying.
Right. Okay.
Sure, because we want a vivid image. The jury has not read the file.
Ms. Franklin, can you go into more detail about these practices, specifically about the starvation?
So there were, I don't exactly recall. I do remember there was one instance where I was actually locked in one of the isolation chambers, and I didn't get food for a number of days. I don't recall how long it was though.
What were the circumstances behind that?
Why were you put there?
Yeah, why were you put there? Would you like a refresher?
I would, yes.
Sorry, this will not happen in
Yeah, I just,
Right, yeah.
yeah, I just don't.
Nobody doesn't forget anything in the competition. You
Yeah,
not
oh, yeah.
necessarily need to have to learn how to refresh recollection. Just tell her, refresh by leaving.
Because I can't remember if that's
Just
the,
tell her the answer.
yeah,
That's the answer, okay.
yeah, I can't remember if that's the time with the phone, or not the phone, because that was a meeting, never mind, just keep going, yeah.
Okay, so that time specifically was, it wasn't the time when I'm trying to remember exactly, so it wasn't the time that your father beat you while he was drunk. It was for, I think, so you, you didn't want to do some of the labor on the camp.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so why were you put in the isolation chamber?
I was really tired of working. I didn't want to do the labor that was on the camp. It was like hard manual labor, and I was just really tired of doing it, and I didn't see the point to it. And I brought that up to my father, and so he locked me in this isolation chamber.
So, Ms. Franklin, were there
So,
other
by the
instances-
way, so I'm just thinking, right? A minute ago you had her say, oh yeah, what was it like there? Oh, we really had to work our butts off, it was really hard work.
Yeah.
Okay? So the next question could have been, did you ever complain about that work? Oh yeah, what happened when you did? I got stuck in the isolation chamber. How does that work? Oh, they took all my clothes, they put me in there. How long were you in there? I don't know. Did you get any food? No.
Okay.
Things like that.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Try to, but you want to go write this. This is not stuff you think up out of your head. You want
Right.
to think, all right, I'm writing this, and as I did, and it's got to be short, much quicker than you guys are doing.
Okay.
So let me just gather my thoughts for a second.
I know we interrupt a lot.
That's good. We need it.
Yeah,
Where are you going next? What do you want to cover next?
I want to go into the suicide, or the attempted suicide.
How did it make you feel?
How did life on the compound make you feel?
I felt very alone and very isolated most of the time.
Did you ever try to do anything about that?
Yes.
Overruled.
Yes, there was a specific night on, I believe, July 22nd, 2015, where I attempted suicide.
what happened that night?
I had cut my wrists, and Mr. O'Connor, found me and brought me to the hospital.
And after you came home from the hospital, who was waiting for you?
My father. And, Mr. O'Connor came back from the hospital with me, and my father was waiting.
What did Mr. O'Connor do when you arrived home?
While I was at the hospital, I received a prescription for antidepressants, and when we got back home, Mr. O'Connor tore up the prescription and said something along the lines of the medical industry feeding into the capitalistic machine.
And what did you do?
I yelled at him because I was prescribed medication, so it's clearly something I needed, and
how did your father respond?
my father slapped me, and then Mr. O'Connor told him to pick me up off the floor and slap me again.
And what did you see?
I just saw Mr. O'Connor kind of standing there smiling.
But Mr. O'Connor wasn't always mean to you. What were some times that he was kind to you?
Well, he gave me a phone, which is something that people on the compound don't get. They don't get their own things. And he gave me a phone that I could use to have direct contact with him And he paid for my college tuition and drove me to and from school every day. Every day that there was school, anyway.
Was there a point when your relationship changed?
Yes. There was a night where my father found the phone that Mr. O'Connor gave me, and he started getting very angry, and I could see that look in his eye. So I took my phone from him and I ran upstairs and like closed myself into my room and texted Mr. O'Connor to come help me.
Was Mr. O'Connor there right away?
He was not.
And where was your father?
At that point, he had broken down the door or broken into my room, and he began to beat me.
Did you defend yourself?
As best I could. I tried to ward off a couple blows, and I felt this like crack and this rush of pain in my arm. So not very successfully, no, I did not.
Did you hear anything?
I heard a crash.
And what did you see?
At that point, I looked up and I saw my father like falling over, and Mr. O'Connor kind of just standing there.
Okay. Now, Ms. Franklin, I want to go back to the cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
Were there any restrictions on you using that phone?
Not explicitly. It was used for the purpose of talking to Mr. O'Connor.
Your Honor, permission to approach the witness with exhibits 4A through D. I don't remember what trial.
They're already admitted.
They're already admitted. May I approach her with these documents?
Yes.
Multiple exhibits up here. Okay. Ms. Franklin, do you recognize these?
I do.
What are they?
They are text messages between Mr. O'Connor and myself.
Can you take over from that?
Okay.
No, I'll be right back.
Okay. Let me look at. Ms. Franklin, I'm going to direct your attention to Exhibit 4A.
Yes.
It's stated in this exhibit that you said there's a lecture tonight on socialism's rise in American politics. It connects with what we're learning in class, and I want to go, can't I? And what did Mr. O'Connor say?
He said, no, there's work to be done at the compound.
And then you pleaded with him, and what did he say?
He said, no, the covenant comes first.
All right, now I want to direct your attention to Exhibit 4B. Mr. O'Connor stated that he stopped by to visit you for lunch, and he found out you were hanging out with, you were having drinks with some skanky, material-obsessed bimbos. And what did you respond with?
I said, I literally just wanted to get coffee with them.
And what did he say?
He said, no, I'm so upset with you, that's not why you're there.
All right, now, Ms. Franklin, I'd like to direct your attention to Exhibit 4C.
Mhm.
And what did you say for that first text?
I said I need to study after class with my group. Can I stay on campus until 6 or 7?
And how did he respond?
No.
Now, did he give any explanation?
No, he did not.
And why was that?
Objection.
Also speculation.
Do you want to respond to it?
Your Honor, may I be heard out of the,
Yes.
okay. Your Honor,
If allowed to testify, say this.
if allowed to testify, Ms. Franklin has
Will
the,
say,
If allowed
if
to
allowed to
If
testify,
testify.
she will say,
she will say,
and tell me what she's going to say, word for word.
she's going to say no. Oh, she's going to say that she understood the answer. That
What
she knew the
answer?
That the covenant comes first and that it was no.
So the question was, why didn't he say more, right?
Yes.
And so if allowed to testify, she will testify that she by this point understood that the covenant comes first, and he didn't have to say anything more than no,
Okay,
right?
yes.
And then why isn't that speculation?
Because it's the, it's coming from the witness herself and her own perceptions, it's not coming from.
There's
a
already an
speculative-
established pattern that every time she asked for it, she was told that the covenant comes first and she cannot do it. She's no longer speculating as to the reason why. She knows
I
the
see,
reason why,
okay.
right?
Yes.
So tell me that. Go through that whole thing. If allowed to testify, tell me the whole thing.
If allowed to testify, Ms. Franklin will testify that she knew the answer, and that answer was no, the covenant comes first. And Ms. Franklin is not speculating because there's an established pattern that every time she asks to spend time with friends or asked outside to be, when she was on university to spend time with her friends, that he would respond. So she's no longer, she is not speculating, Your Honor. It's an established pattern.
Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but you gotta argue it well.
Right.
Got it?
Yes.
Okay, good. Excellent.
Are we overruling or?
I'm gonna overrule it now. I want you to
Okay.
re-ask the question so she can answer it.
Okay. Ms. Franklin, why didn't he give you a response? Why didn't he elaborate more?
Because at that point, I knew that why the answer was no. I knew that it was because the covenant comes first.
All right, thank you, Ms. Franklin.
So I don't think, by the way, I think you guys are gonna have to really simplify this whole thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think that whole exchange is necessary at all. I think all you need out of those things is she keeps wanting to do something, he goes no. That's all. He goes no. He says no. He says no. He says no. I don't care why he says no. He says no, and she's stuck. That's all we need to know. That's all the jury needs to get out of this. He's in charge. He's the boss. He says no. We're done. I don't even know why. Don't care why. He says no.
All right, Ms. Franklin, I'd like to direct your attention to Exhibit 4D.
Mm-hmm.
And what did you say in that first text?
I said, well, Mr. O'Connor said that he'll pick me up at 5, and then I responded with, actually, I need to work late with Stacy for a class project.
And how did he respond?
He said, no, I will pick you up at 5, don't make me wait.
Okay. You stated earlier that you attended university. What was it like?
Well, I liked it. I liked class, but it was difficult to meet people. It was pretty lonely
And why was it difficult to meet people?
because I wasn't allowed to meet people. I would go to class and then I would come home because Mr. O'Connor would immediately just pick me up and I would be home.
Now, Ms. Franklin, I want to talk about this final piece. How old were you when you joined the compound?
I believe I was 13 or 14, around that age.
And you stated that your father gave up all of his possessions. So was there any way for you to leave the compound?
There were cars that were given to Mr. O'Connor once we all joined. That I know that you could sign them out, but they were his cars. So.
What are you getting at here?
The
I think we did this before. I recall saying this before. What are you after?
escape?
Yeah. And what do you want to know? Why didn't she leave? Right?
Yeah, I don't think I went fully. Did I go fully into that?
No, his point is that.
Oh.
on
My
this-
point is you're asking all the reasons why she didn't leave
Okay.
in a very awkward
Oh, so
way,
just ask her why she
trying to
didn't
come up with something to lead her into saying something, when really all you have to do is, so how come you didn't leave the commune? And let her explain everything.
Doesn't she say in the record, I didn't believe I could, or something like that?
She.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
And there's other things too that they want to get out. She had no life skills, there's no place she could go, she had no money, there's all sorts of things.
Those are good
But
things.
all of those are reasons why, and that the way you get at those is you ask her, why didn't you leave? And then she gives you the reasons. And you work that out in advance in your prep session, and you have a list ready.
So, Ms. Franklin, why didn't you leave the compound?
I didn't believe that I could.
Could you elaborate that? Why?
Well, the challenge her like you're on cross almost. She says, didn't believe I could. Well, couldn't you just rent an apartment? Your answer?
Rent an apartment. I wouldn't know how to do that. I've never,
Well, why didn't you you could leave and get a job, couldn't you, and support yourself?
I've never held a job doing anything but farm work.
Do you see how a cross on direct is so much more powerful? My direct turns into a kind of cross because I'm asking all the stuff they're going to ask, but I'm doing it nice and letting her explain it.
I see.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. So, couldn't you leave the compound?
No, I didn't think that I could.
Couldn't you have taken a car to leave the compound?
I would have to sign them out, and they belong to Mr. O'Connor anyway.
Couldn't you have gotten a job when you left the compound?
Don't really think I have any job experience. I mean, I do chores on the compound, but I don't jobs. I've never had a job.
Could you have found a place to stay when you left the compound?
With no job, no money, no.
What did Mr. O'Connor tell you if you ever tried to leave the compound?
He told me that I would end up like my mother.
And where is your mother?
My mother is dead.
Thank you.
That didn't come out nearly as good this time as it did last time. Is that in a document or anything? Is that what
Yeah, it's in her statement. It's that she stated
Just a
that.
statement,
Yeah.
not a separate document.
No,
Oh, no,
not
no.
in a separate.
So this page, the reason that didn't come off very well is you just kind of rushed through it.
Yeah.
Mrs. O'Connor, or Mrs. Franklin, you knew about this attack, right?
I'm sorry?
You knew about this attack?
You mean the bombing?
Yes.
Yes.
In fact, you actually helped keep it secret.
It wasn't really a secret.
You kept it between you, Mr. O'Connor, and Baylor Riswold?
Right, so there are multiple people who knew about it.
Yeah, so when looking at Exhibit 4H, which has already been admitted into evidence, you told Ralph, Chris keeps asking questions. Well, he just approached me and asked about CRB, and then when he told you he'll take care of it, you responded with a text message?
Yes, it did.
And that text message is an equal sign and a parentheses to make a smiley face?
Yes.
So you're pretty excited about ratting out Chris?
He said he referred to me fondly, and so I would do anything for his affection. And so when he gave even just a little bit to me, I of course couldn't help but react that way.
So this is another text message from your phone. It's Exhibit 4K. That's the same smiley face that you write, the equal sign in parentheses.
Well, Mr.
What's the point
O'Connor,
of this?
I'm trying to show that she sent this text message.
She sent what one?
The one that set off the bomb.
Sent boom.
Yeah.
Doesn't she admit that?
no,
No.
she doesn't.
It's contested.
In her statement, she says I didn't
Our
send it.
witness said, I did it. Didn't I? Wow.
Yeah, her statement, she denies sending the text message.
She says that O'Connor did it because he knew the password to her phone.
So, but you're so premature on this, right? Is it your case that she did all of these things, but the last one is send the text message to shut it off, and you're starting there, and I'm not sure why that's so out of order, it feels.
Okay.
Feels to me like that should be at the end, when you're saying, and the last thing you did is you sent the text message to blow the thing up.
Okay.
And she says, no, I didn't, and then you say, well, you did this equal sign, and then see this equal sign in the thing, then you did this message and it has that, you did this message and it had that, you did all of these things.
Okay.
But that's the end, I think.
Okay. I just had it
What's the
organized
first
at
thing
that
she
point.
did?
Um,
For a
Well,
first
it's
line.
so it's the end of point one. Setting off the bomb is the end of point one.
Yeah, so this was gonna be the end of point one, but I think we're saying that this whole thing should go at the end of the whole exam.
No, it should be the end of point one.
Should I address point one first?
Yeah, it's point one.
I'm confused.
Point one is what?
When do I do the texts?
I don't know what point one is. Point
So
one.
my point one is that she helped plan the attack and build the bomb. So
Okay, so what's the first thing she did to help plan the attack?
Came up with the idea.
she came up with the idea, but that's under point two for she wanted revenge. I think I just need to reorganize this then.
And
Point
I
two, she
agree,
doesn't
and
have
definitely you do, because the first thing you wanna do is all the things she did.
Do we have to?
And then I suppose you could say
Oh,
why.
that's right, yes, okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
So, I'm sorry, Professor, what did you say?
I said, I suppose you can do all the things she did and then do why. But you're right, there's some repetition. You gotta get out what she did in chronological order.
So then should I just reorganize this by chronological order and not by points? Because they kind of go back and forth.
I don't know the answer to that because your point is what? Number one, she did it. Number two, she was under his,
So the way we organize this whole.
she was not under his spell.
Yeah, the way this whole exam, my two exams are organized is one, she helped plan the attack and build a bomb.
Yeah.
Two, she wanted revenge. Three is a rejoinder to address Stockholm syndrome. And that's it. But
All right,
it's
she
four-
wanted revenge.
Mhm.
Strikes me as a piece of the part about she did it.
Okay, so
Because that's one of the reasons why we know that she was in charge of the whole, not in charge, but she came up with the idea. And how do we know, how do we know that she's the one who came up with this whole idea? They bombed the place that her mother got killed. She picked the place. That's the one thing we are absolutely, got good and solid on our side. But I think that can be more towards the end even. I think the first thing you did when you got, about this whole thing. I mean, what was the first thing they did? She came up with the idea, and it was about the place. And that is the motive in there. So yeah, I think that you have to take point two is point one.
Okay.
I think you have 2 points, not 3. Your first one is she did it, your second one is she was under a spell. Or wasn't under a spell.
Okay, so we'll just start with why she did it and then do the text.
Mhm.
Okay. Ms. O'Connor, your mother died in that bank, didn't she?
Sorry.
Your mother died at the Central Reserve Bank in Syracuse, New York,
Yes.
and that's the bank you decided to bomb on May 23rd, 2019.
I wanted to make Mr. O'Connor happy, and he'd always talked about bombing something. And so I said, well, if you're gonna bomb something, let's bomb a bank.
So
And I
then
knew
you
of that.
yourself said that you wanted to bomb a bank, and it was that bank.
He wanted to bomb a bank, and I told him, why not just do this one?
So then you admit that you suggested to bomb the very bank that your mother died in, yes?
It was the one that I was familiar with. I was a teenager when I joined this organization. I had never been to another bank. It's the only one I knew of.
So then after planning all of this stuff, you eventually sent a text message to that bomb, didn't you? Because you wanted to detonate it.
I'm sorry?
You wanted to set off the bomb, correct?
Why are we setting it off? Don't we have to go buy it, open the account, check the stuff out? She does all of the steps, right? She opens the account, she goes into the bank and plants coffee cups probably and stuff. Doesn't she do all of these things? That's what I think we have to make her the primary, your cross of her is number one. You're the primary actor here. Not these other two guys. It's not you're following their bidding. They're following your bidding. You pick the place. So that's point number one is you're the one. More than them even. Point number two is you're not afraid of this guy. He's your boyfriend. So that's point number two.
Okay.
But when you're doing what she did, that is chronological. Yes.
Okay.
You came up with the idea, next you did this, you opened the account, next you did this, next you did that, you did all these things, and finally the last thing you did was you sent this text message. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. Here's why I proved that. Next, let's talk about
Okay. Let me try it.
his influence over you.
You chose the bank, because that's where your mother died.
It was the only bank I knew of.
So yes.
Yes.
And then you opened a bank account, right?
So Mr. O'Connor had me go to open a bank account so that way I could be a distraction while he found places to plant the bomb.
So the answer to my question is yes, you opened a bank account.
I opened it in his direction, yes.
And you took money from Mr. O'Connor and put it in your account.
Yes, I did.
In fact, at one point, you had over $1,700 in your account,
I
right?
don't remember.
Probably started out with 50 grand, didn't it?
That's the opening balance of
Yeah,
it.
so at one point she had 50 grand in there.
At one point, you had $15,000 in your account,
I
right?
don't remember.
Um,
It wasn't my money.
That money was in your name, wasn't it?
yeah.
And according to the bank, you had authority over those funds, didn't you?
Regardless
That's
of,
objection, I don't care.
yeah, regardless of whether you remember, you had control over that bank account, right?
No, it was his money.
But it was your account.
No, not really.
Either way, you made purchases at Home Depot and Walmart.
I didn't, no.
Someone using your bank account went and took your bank account to buy home stuff at Home Depot and Walmart,
Are you
right?
sure it was Mr. O'Connor or Mr. Griswold?
When you went to the Home Depot and Walmart, you were buying materials to build a bomb, weren't you?
I wasn't buying the materials. I mean, I know that they did buy those materials, but they actually wouldn't let me involved with that part. I, in fact, once tried to go into the room while they were building the bomb, and Mr. O'Connor explicitly told me to stay out and that I wasn't allowed inside.
That would make sense because bombs are explosive, but moving on. You,
Objection, objection testifying.
You just say, move to strike those remarks, you know.
Okay, yeah.
Something.
but when it came time to decide who was going to detonate the bomb, you told Mr. O'Connor you wanted to detonate the bomb.
I don't remember that.
And then on the.
Were there rehearsals to place it with the coffee cups I heard about? Was she involved in that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
So I want you to, you don't have to do it right now.
Okay.
Because I see you're kind of winging it, trying to do it off the top of your head, and it's 5:25 and I'm ready to go. So here's what you do need to do though, is you need to go back and you need to say, well, I want her to take her through every step that I can prove she did along the way to blowing this place up. Per person. So I would take out of it this whole part about you bought the stuff, if she can deny it the way Tom just did. Go, no, I didn't do it, I wasn't even there, I have no clue. But if you can prove that she did, or you can say, and that account was used to buy these funds, to buy this stuff, that you got. Whatever you've got, you use it, but you take it through everything that she actually did as culpable, and end up with sending the text.
Okay. I'm gonna skip the planting and just go to, this is your text
Yep.
message. Should I just do that whole part
Yes.
again? Okay. Now, leading up to the attack, you knew it had to be kept between you, Mr. O'Connor, and Baylor Griswold, right?
That's the way Mr. O'Connor wanted it, yeah.
And so, looking at this text message, when Chris came looking, or started asking a lot of questions, you knew that you had to tell Mr. O'Connor.
Yeah, I would do anything he told me to do.
And when you wanted to express happiness through a text, you used this happy symbol, an equal sign and a parentheses to make a smiley face.
I always used that with him, so he knew that I would use that.
If he always knew that you would use that, is that why you wrote boom smiley face when you sent the text that detonated the bomb?
No, that's why I just said that, because he wrote it, but he always knew I used that kind of smiley face.
Even though there's no evidence in any of these text messages that he ever uses like that with you?
Well, you just showed me the text messages I sent him with it, so he would know that that's how I do it.
So you want to argue with the witness, Jen, but you're not using your facts, right? Do you have facts that he cannot deny? See this is the message that set off the bomb, right? Now maybe he'll say, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then you say, it ends with this funny smiley face with the equal sign and the parentheses, right? Now, that's not a smiley face like an emoji smiley face, right? That's not a smiley face even like a colon parentheses smiley face. That's just equals. Let's see where else we can find that. Oh, here's an email from you where that was used. Here's another email from you where that was used. Here's some emails from him, wasn't used.
So then just flip it and say this.
It's all fact stuff.
Okay.
You follow it? It's just a fact. Here's what it has. Here's what it's not. Here's here's the other 2 times it appears. That's all. I'm not saying you did it. I'm just saying here it is, and the jury can draw their conclusions.
Okay.
You're just asking facts, not trying to get conclusions. You're trying to get conclusions from an opponent witness, and especially in a competition where your opponent is your actual law student opponent. They're real hard.
So this is the text that sent and detonated the bomb. It has an equal sign in parentheses.
Yes, it does.
This is a text sent to Ralph or Mr. O'Connor, writing out by you, saying that Chris keeps
Doesn't matter
asking
what it
questions.
says.
Huh?
Doesn't matter what it says.
Okay.
All that matters is it has that symbol on it.
And this is a text sent by you to Mr. O'Connor, where you also sent a smiley face using an equal sign in parentheses, right?
Well, I didn't send the first one.
That wasn't my question. This is the same, this is a text message that you sent to Mr. O'Connor using an equal sign and a parentheses,
Well, your
right?
other question was you also sent, so that's why I was answering it that way.
In this case, you sent a message to Mr. O'Connor making a smiley face out of an equal sign and a parentheses.
On that one, yes.
Now, Ms. Franklin, I want to address some things that you said on,
There was another one though too, wasn't there?
yeah, I don't know where it is,
Oh, all right.
on the top of my
Make
head.
sure you have them.
Yeah.
All the equal sign parentheses, right
Yeah.
in a row.
I don't know where it is right now, so I
Okay.
figured I would just keep going.
You'll get it.
I want to go back to what you were talking about on direct.
Okay.
You talked a lot about the fact that you were afraid of Ray, because Ray was the one who kept you to a grueling schedule every day.
My father?
Yes.
Yes, I was afraid of him.
And you learned pretty quickly that it was your father who was going to hurt you if you complained about anything contrary to the covenant.
He would also do anything that Mr. O'Connor wanted.
But it was Ray who ordered you to fast.
That was one of Mr. O'Connor's rules, so he ordered me to do it.
So yes, it was your father who ordered you to fast.
Well, it was also Mr. O'Connor.
And
It was
it
his
was-
rule.
And it was your father who took away your food?
That was one of Mr. O'Connor's rules, yes.
And you feared your father because you knew he was crazy enough to hurt or kill you, right?
Yes.
And alternatively, you sought out Mr. O'Connor.
He was the only person in the entire world that ever did something nice for me, so I would do anything for him.
So yes, you sought out Mr. O'Connor instead. In fact, you found any excuse to be with him when you were on the compound?
Yeah, including setting up a bombing. I would do anything for him.
And you really liked to be with him.
Yes.
And being with him made you happy?
It was the only happiness I had.
And Mr. O'Connor regularly brought you to college, didn't he?
He was the only, the only way I ever got off that compound is when I was either with him or with Mr. Griswold.
So yes, he brought you to college,
Yes.
and Mr. O'Connor never stayed at school with you?
He set very strict limits of when I had to be prepared to go back home.
So he never stayed at school with you?
No, not while I was there, but it was basically like going from one prison to another.
But just to be clear, he never stayed at college with you.
No, it was like work release.
Then he just drove you there and back?
He would drive me there, and then he would drive me back, yes.
And when you were at college without him, you saw other people at school?
I mean, I saw them, but it was like they were strangers to me.
And you also were able to talk to them?
Not really. I mean, they were outsiders, and I was an outsider to them. There was no real relationship between us.
But yes, you could talk to them.
No, I was ingrained from 13 to not trust these people. So I didn't ever feel like I really could interact with him. And anytime I tried, Mr. O'Connor told me I wasn't allowed to.
Moving on then, you did have a phone with you though, right?
So I was given a phone so that way, at the time I was still living with my father, I was able to talk to Mr. O'Connor even though I wasn't physically around him.
And when you had this phone, you knew how to use it?
What do you mean by that?
You knew how to text people on it, right?
I knew how to communicate with Mr. O'Connor with it, yeah.
So yes, you knew how to text people.
I knew how to text him.
You knew how to use a phone to send a text.
His number was programmed into the phone.
So yes.
I don't know what you mean.
So yes, you did know how to send a text.
You don't have to fight for the yes. Everyone knows the answer. And when you go, say my yes, I want you to say yes. That makes you the lawyer jerk.
Okay. And you also have already admitted that you had a bank account in your name.
Yeah.
And at one point, it had $50,000.
I don't remember that.
Your bank statement says that you at one point had $50,000. It also says that you went on a shopping spree at Eddie Bauer where you spent $954. Do you remember that?
No, because that's not me. I've never seen that
Yeah,
bank
this is
statement
evidence.
before.
Is that evidence?
You also went and to Coach where you spent $629.
Like I said before, I've never seen the bank statement before, and I don't remember ever doing that.
Either way, it appears that you went to school on
Coach sells handbags, right?
yeah, luxury
Not-
handbags.
Yeah, not bomb parts.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure.
Okay. Can I ask that?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Franklin, Coach sells luxury handbags and not PC piping, doesn't it?
I don't know.
Either way, it seems that you had a working phone, upwards of thousands of dollars in your personal bank account, which you had access to, and you regularly were dropped off at school where you spent entire days on your own with a bank account and a phone. Did I get that correct?
No.
Your Honor, I'd like to redirect.
You might. Because you got something good.
I got a great answer for you if you answer my question.
Oh, Ms. Franklin, why would you do anything for Mr. O'Connor?
He was the only person in the entire world, that had ever done something nice for me. And what else could I do? I mean, am I supposed to alienate him too? I mean, am I supposed to say to him, no, I don't want any kindness in my life? I mean, he was the only person there. He was the only one. What else am I supposed to do?
Thank you, Ms. Franklin.
Oh, man.
Is there another question?
Well, I'd love to be able to say that I actually did try to escape. I tried to kill myself. And even then, he was there.
Oh, that would have been so good.
Wow.
Ah,
Whoa.
remember
Damn.
that girl?
Yeah, little girl.
You make me very sad.
All right, so we're
Damn,
back
that is loaded.
through, so we're back through it the second time.